and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, welcome to All Politics and Local America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. So listen, y'all know if it is Friday, y'all know it's time for All Politics and Local. But more importantly, y'all know if it is the first Friday, y'all know it's time for the Payne Report. So that's Congressman Donald M. Payne. He'll be coming up tonight at 8 o'clock. We'll be talking about everything that's going on the floor of Congress, and what we'll definitely talk about with the congressman. Of course, those two dueling press conferences that were coming from the border. So we'll talk with the congressman about, of course, President Biden and of course Trump both doing those press conferences and having two different statements, as you all know, we probably would have gotten. So we'll talk to the congressman when he comes through. But tonight we've got a couple of things we're going to do. Up front, we're going to talk with Annette Austin, who is, of course, you all know, on this show is the author of one of our beloved brothers' new book. That has come out, and she'll give you all of the details, and of course, some of the events that are coming up as well. She'll share that. So we'll make that announcement, and she'll talk about that. And then we're going to talk with Linda Carter tonight. She's going to talk to us about this new movie that is out as it relates to this documentary. As you all may know, you may remember this Kimber story about a sister who was in prison for selling drugs, and during the time she was a college student, and so forth with her boyfriend. Of course, she got pardoned, was released from prison. She had this incredible amount of time that she was given. So we're going to talk with one of the sisters who is following up and wrote a piece about that. Well, we're going to look somewhere down the road too to get Kimber on directly and talk with her too. So that's coming up, and then of course we're going to talk with Brother Zaid. He's going to talk to us about a new book. We'll bring the author on. We'll talk about that. So they'll give you some more of those full details. And then, of course, at 8 o'clock, we'll have the congressman on, and we'll talk with him as well. So we're gonna bring Annette Austin on, and we're gonna talk about that book that she has coming up. And more importantly, we're going to talk about the dates, because we really need you all to be engaged, and let's get busy about supporting our brother Larry. As you all know, Larry is much beloved in the city of Newark, and particularly some of the things that he has done on the front line, really practically this brother's whole entire life. So let's welcome Annette Austin to the show. Hey, what's up, Annette?
Hi, how are you doing? Good to
I'm
see you.
good. How are you?
I am well. I am well.
So first,
Yeah,
let me say congratulations on finally getting the book done.
thank
Because
you.
every time Larry came on, your brother Jonathan Austin, one of the co-hosts of the show, would annoy Larry, and Larry would say, "It's getting done. It's getting done." So
Yeah,
congratulations on finally getting it done.
it is finally done. And it has been years. I don't even want to say how many years we have been working on this off and on. So it is finally done. The books have arrived. I am excited. Um, this book, Lawrence Ham, A Life in the Struggle, really gives you an idea as to what drives him. And we all know, anyone who knows him, anyone who's seen any of his speeches, anyone who's been in his presence knows that this man is driven. Okay. And it's sincere. um he's very sincere, and I think one thing that you get out of this book, if nothing else, is where he's coming from, and what motivates him to do what he does every day. And so I am honored, really, to have had an opportunity to tell his story and work with him on telling his story. And so uh, I'm hoping that everyone comes out on March 9th, Newark Public Library. We'll be there from um, 2 to 5. And we're looking forward to seeing you. And then the day before that, we'll be at the Universalist um, Church, Universalist Church. I know I'm saying this all wrong. I'm sorry, in Montclair. And that is going to be from it's really involving young journalists.
Okay.
And if you're a young person and you're into it or thinking about writing uh, for the media, definitely you want to come to this activity. It starts at 5 o'clock at the Universalist Church. I hope I said that correctly, in Montclair. And it should be a really great experience. We're going to be interviewed by a young journalist named Emma, and so I'm looking forward to it and talking about and sharing about this book. So I'm looking forward to seeing everyone, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to do this little shout out.
And that's first the Universalist Church. That's gonna be on Friday, right?
That's going to be on Friday. That's the 8th, and that starts at 5 o'clock and goes to 6:30.
5 p.m. to 6.
And both myself and Larry will be there.
And the Universalist Church now, that's going to be live. It's not so folks are invited to come.
I think that's going to be a hybrid experience, but yes, it is going to be live. We invite people to come out there. We want people to come out.
Okay.
We will not have the books at this event. It's a
Oh wow.
pre-launch situation, but the actual launch of the book is going to be on the 9th
So the actual launch is going to be that
at the
Saturday,
Newark Public Library, right?
and that's going to be March the 9th.
The following day,
And
and we'll have plenty of books.
that's next Saturday, right?
Yes.
Now, a lot of folks have been asking me, is Larry going to be signing those books?
Yes, he is.
Okay. Because
Both of us will have our signatures on the book.
oh, that's
Though nobody cares about my signature.
well, the thing is that folks are saying, well, Larry's been in this movement so long, he's getting older. We definitely want to make sure he signed the book because it took him long enough to finally get it done.
Absolutely.
So we
So
want to
no,
make sure.
we have dedicated time at the Newark Library for him to sign books. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to Stephanie Harris, the director of Africana Studies at Seton Hall University. She's going to be moderating the event, and so we're excited about that.
Oh
Um,
wow. What's her
yeah,
name? Stephanie Harris?
Stephanie Harris, Dr. Stephanie Harris,
Is she the new director up there?
at
Oh,
Seton Hall University, right?
okay. Yeah, that should be really, really great.
Formerly, she was over Amistad.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So she's done a lot of great things over the
So
years, and so I'm looking forward to seing her
oh wow.
there, and I'm honored that she's willing to moderate for us as well.
Oh, that's gonna be great.
Mhm.
Now, let me ask you a question. Is there any snippets you can give us about the book that we should be looking forward to hear from Larry and you talk a little bit about, just because I mean, I know Larry and I know that, probably you all went a little bit more deeper since it's his autobiography. So you all probably went a little deeper than some of the conversations he and I may have had, or that we may have had with them. And that's one of the reasons why people should come and why people should definitely look to purchase this book. So, what are some of the things that you kind of discovered, writing this book about our brother?
Okay, so hmm, hmm.
Because here's the thing,
and
right? We
there's
kind of know
so
he started his political career when he was in high
right.
school on the board of education and so forth.
But and a lot of people know that story. They know the story about how he started when he was 17 years old, really uh, leading 200 students down to the Board of Education, and just letting the adults know that they need to get it together and
Right.
figure this out, because some of them want to graduate and go on to school, and their graduation was at stake, because the strike had went over 35 days, and they were in danger. These students were in danger of not graduating, so that was huge. um, and when you see where he came out of, you recognize he didn't come out of a political family.
Mm, mm,
His family wasn't, they were working class people, making it. And but it was the movement, the Black Power movement. It was the events of that time that really just moved him to do the things that he did. It was the teacher strike that really got him started, and the danger of his not graduating.
mm,
It was apartheid that moved him, at Princeton, to do the sit-ins. It was the continual, you know, uh, issues that he was seeing that were impacting our people, that made him feel like, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to make a difference in people's lives. And you see this as you go through the book. You see the things that really moved him, and you see him grow through this. And it's quite interesting. And another thing you learn too, as you're going through the different periods, because his life really does uh, progress through the various eras of history, from you know the the Newark Rebellion, through the Black Power movement, through um, the uh, the Million Man March, and you know
mm.
all of the other things that came on, the police brutality issues. um, he's had an impact in every step of it, even in terms of education. um, and basically that's where he started off. But yeah, even later on, talking about Abbott versus Burke, and some of the things that we did to make sure that our children had equity in the classrooms. And so, there's a lot in this book, and I know that I hope and pray I did it justice,
Mm.
in the part that I played in this. um you know uh, but yeah. Yeah. And even after going through this, toward the end, I realized, there's still more I could have written. There's
Mm,
more that could have been in here.
mm.
um One thing I kind of wish we had gone into was his relationship with Mumia Abu Jamal. Really didn't go into that a lot, and there were reasons why, but I, just I would have loved to have delved into that a little bit more.
He had a personal relationship with Mamiya.
Well, I mean, he's met him and he's talked to him a couple of times, but I mean, just in terms of what his the fight with, as far as People's Organization was concerned, and what we did to try to support Mumia Bujamal. He did go to visit him,
Mm,
and I wanted to put that in there, but he couldn't remember a lot about what the conversation was and everything. And I was like, okay, we can't, this. It was difficult to really build something around that, but we could always revisit that. I kind of wish I had been able to go and visit Mumia myself, and he might have remembered some of the conversation himself, and
and
that.
how
So
long ago,
that's one of my other little things, but I I think I transgress the
how
things I
long
could probably
ago
find.
was that he went to he had went to see Mamiya? How long ago was
I think that was like in 2014, 15. We were trying to
that?
figure that all out. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that would have been really, really interesting. You know.
Yeah, but it was difficult. It was difficult, because it was, he couldn't, he didn't remember all of the conversations in that, so, or what they really talked about in terms of that. And I'm talking too much, but yeah.
No, no. Listen, let me ask you a question. Does the book delve into, of course, what's important to me, and I'd say to a lot of us, was his being the youngest person, or one of the youngest persons, because I found out that Reverend Sharpton was also there in 1972 at the National Black Political Convention in
Mm.
Gary, Indiana. Do you all talk about that?
We mentioned it. We go into his going to Gary, and one of the focuses was the fact that when he went in there, he saw the Black liberation flags around,
Mm,
and that's a sticking point because he was like, he cried when he saw the Black liberation flags.
mm,
He was like, yes,
wow,
because he had gotten into so much. When you read the book, you'll find out, and actually the book even starts off really with that particular incident, with his trying to get the Black liberation flags in the schools, in the classrooms.
mm,
And it wasn't, when you find out how all of that came about. I mean, it wasn't priority for him. There were other things that were priority as far as he was concerned, but it was an issue that came up, and he just went along with it and thought, okay, yeah, why not? Why not have
mm.
the Black liberation flags in the classroom? And this became such a huge issue. I mean, um, that Amiri Baraka, when he went to Tanzania, I think it was, heard about this all the way out there. I mean, this became a national issue. It blew up. The fact, how dare he, even think about, putting the Black liberation flag in classrooms and stuff. I mean, it was in the New York Times. It was just, So when he went to Gary, Indiana, and he saw the Black liberation flags all over, he was like, yes.
Mm, mm.
It was, that was one of the things that came out of that. But um, yeah, I mean, I it really is an overview of everything that he, went through, and or experienced coming through, and the things that had an impact on his life and his thinking. So, yep.
So I mean, I'm really, really interested in that because, as that continuation goes on today. We have the raising of the liberation flag, of course, in front of City Hall. Of course, Bashir does a big thing at Weekway. When we were up at Seton Hall back in the '90s, that was a big thing, raising the liberation flag. That's, it's not done at every school, but I
Hmm.
would, but I would think Larry had something to do with it. Let me, by the way, let me welcome Brother Zaid Muhammad, one of the other co-hosts to the show. Brother Zaid, we're talking with Annette, of course, about the new
I
autobiography
know her.
that, yeah,
Zaid has a part in this autobiography. He is writing the epilogue in it, and so and thank you so much for your contribution, Zaid. Thank you so much.
I was humbled to
yeah.
be asked to do it.
Now I'm supposed to be on, I think, next week as well. So I'm gonna, if it's okay, dip out at this time. But I will be on. Well, you know what? I'm Because of the event that's going on from 5 to 6:30 next week. I'll probably get in the tail end of it, but Larry will be on next week.
Well, wait a minute. Hold up. Before you dip out, it's one thing to talk about Lawrence Ham, the legend, and all of that stuff. But, Annette Austin ain't no goddamn lightweight,
Mm.
right? You done thrown down yourself. This ain't your first ride with getting the book out. I heard once upon a time you did something on Harriet Tubman herself,
That's
right?
it. That's it.
Made some serious moves down there in Georgia. I understand you down there, found you some new place to do some instigating down in Georgia. You start right? What
Yeah,
is
they're
going
so
on?
laid back here.
So what is going on with the great Annette Austin? What is her next? What is her
What
now?
is my next? You know what? That's a good question, and I do have some things on. I think I'm actually thinking about returning back to Harriet, and do some more stuff with that.
If she's talking to you, you got to do it.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So stay tuned. Stay tuned on that. And
But you actually are. Do you have been involved in some organizing down there yourself? Tell us about some. You done some voting rights stuff, some other stuff. Talk
yeah,
about the new landscape that you are very much a part of now down in Georgia, down there with your mom,
hmm
right? And who we've had on this show, you know.
Yeah, right.
Uh, yeah. So
Well, what's interesting is I had the opportunity to. I mean, I live in Newton County, Georgia, which used to be a totally red county, and it's now blue. And actually, in no small part, thanks to my mom and dad, you know, who were down here doing voter registration before I moved down here, when President Obama was running. Before he was president, they were doing voter registration, and really that was the beginning of turning this county blue. And since then, a lot of this county has grown, and it's largely blue now. But we're still working to get um, more voters out and get these registrations done. And with there is this fear factor
I
now
wanted you to
that
get there.
wasn't.
I'm glad you're there. I wanted you to lean into that right
Yeah,
there.
there is a fear factor
Trying
now
to
that
talk about
was not in existence when my mother and father were doing voter registrations years ago.
Why is that? What is the fear factor?
Oh, well, we know it's Trump, right? So, and his cult. I don't even say MAGA. It's his cult. Um, and and what comes out of that? You have people that are not afraid anymore to do stupid stuff, like harass people, come out with their. It's some. I mean, we used to talk about people coming out with their faces covered up and stuff, and doing these Klan rallies and stuff. Now you got people coming out, and they don't even bother covering their faces. Now they're starting to cover their faces again, because I think there was some repercussions when they came out in Charlotte, with with their faces uncovered. But I mean, it's just there's so much stuff going on right now. People feel emboldened to
Mm.
do what they want to do, and I think they have had some results. We still have a Confederate statue in our city, that's standing, and I've been reaching out to different people and saying, okay, so this had gone to court, and the judge agreed that it could come down, but then somebody in the county, I think that looked like us, gave it enough air so that and enough time so that other people had a chance to put an injunction against it. Um, Confederate sons of whatever, daughters of, put an injunction against it. But what they should have done was taken that statue down that night, and they didn't.
Mm.
Those are some of the things that we're dealing with here. Okay. Um, and it's complex.
Mm.
Because it's just, so I've they know my face. I make my self presence known in the county board meetings, and et cetera. But they we still have a lot of work to do down here, and I've plugged in with a local chapter of NAN, National Action Network here, and I don't know. I'm
And
just going
so
to
really,
leave it at that. It's a complex situation. Groups that you would think would be doing things tend to fall back and don't do what you would think they should be doing. It's
Did you
not Newark, New Jersey. When stuff comes out, POP has their banners and their signs, and they're like out there in your face. This
did
must
you
stop
see
now.
did you see
That
Principal
doesn't happen
Caffelli's
here.
question? You see Principal Caffelli's question? It's gone. He said, "Are people down there afraid of?
Or I can't see the. I don't have my
Are they
glasses
afraid
on.
of
I'm sorry.
Are they afraid of MAGA?
Are
Are
they
people
afraid of
down MAGA?
MAGA?
Yes.
I think they are afraid of the culture that MAGA has created, if that makes sense. You
Mm.
know, and so they're caution. They have there's a great caution where and for an example, when we had voter registration before, we initially, when my mother and father were doing it, they were able to go in front of Kroger's and stuff and set up booths and tables and do voter registrations out in the open, right? Now, people are afraid to do voter registration out in the open. And I'm talking about different groups that's what they do, the Democratic committees and, groups that are supposed to be getting um, voter voters out. Um, it's like, okay, well, we'll do mailings or something. And I'm like, mailings? Like, what are you talking about?
And what year
you
would you
know,
say? What year was that when your mother and father were out there doing it? What years was?
2008, 2009, right?
Okay. And
Mhm.
in less than 15 years, it's wow. Mm,
Yeah, yeah. There's
wow.
there's a fear factor. There's definitely a fear factor
Oh,
going
and then
on.
now he's Principal Caffelli for fear of what consequences?
Um, there are random shootings across this country. I
Mm,
mean, there are I think those are some of the consequences. They're fearful for their life. No exaggeration. And it's warranted when you have all of these incidents of mass shootings around the country, and a lot of them are based on race, or religion, you know. And so, we these things are happening. It is real, and it's
now,
happening in a way that really wasn't happening on the same scale before. I mean, it's always happened to some degree, but not on this scale that it's been happening, I think, of the last 6, 8 years,
I mean, that
since
really,
Trump came in.
go ahead, Ed. But I want to jump in because we this is a moment we need to really build on. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you. So, with your current organizing, are are the folks down there, or are they organizing with you, or are they afraid to organize? And you, because you talked about Reverend Sharpton's organization, what about the NAACP?
So, yeah. I,
now,
the NAACP in this area, I think, is different from the NAACP in, say, closer to Atlanta, County. I think they do more. I think they're more active. I think they take on issues, you know, in a way that they don't here. They're into, fundraising here, maybe doing scholarships, and that sort of thing. And then the same thing, this particular chapter, I have to say it, they're not as progressive
Wow.
as, what I'm used to anyway. So it's just, and then when I tried to do some things, it was just like I was hitting a wall in some cases. And I was like, okay, you know what? Let me back up for a little while
okay.
and
Well,
And
regroup and decide
recalibrate
how I want to
or
do this.
yeah.
Hmm.
And said recalibrate and figure
Hmm.
step back to go forward. Okay.
Yep.
And Zay, you were saying,
Yeah. So let me
and I
contextualize.
just don't and make sure that we don't have any guests waiting. Also,
Yeah,
go ahead. Also, good.
let me contextualize this question in this way as we wind up with you, right? Fascism relies on its capacity to instill fear in people, right? One of the things that I have been trying to softly nudge into our larger national conversations about how to come into this pivotal election year is a need for a reimagining of Freedom Summer '64, right? '64 was SNCC came up with the strategy to inject as many volunteers from the North, particularly with an emphasis on white volunteers from the North, to come into the South to serve as a kind of buffer to the voter registration efforts that were going on at that time that needed acceleration. Right? But because of the danger and the premium put on white life as opposed to black life, the wave of that kind of folks coming in to the area might create a little more space for some voter registration to take place. I think that when I say the reimagining of Freedom Summer, I'm talking about something else. Y'all know I have a background with an armed tradition, right? 1966, the great March Against Fear, which started out by one black man by himself, James Meredith, walking through Mississippi, who wound up getting shot in the middle of the march, and the movement had to stop and figure out how were we going to respond. And what was the response? That they had an obligation, and this is particularly SNCC and SCLC coming together to continue the march, but they had company. And who was that company? That company was the Deacons of Defense.
And we're gonna pause and say, "Welcome to Professor." Let me just say, "Welcome to Professor Carter." That's all. Go ahead.
We see her. She could jump in this.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we got to get this. We are up against fascism now, and we need to have these conversations. Right. And she's down there on the ground in the midst of something that could be dangerous. Right. So what I'm getting at is this: one of the healthiest things that came out of the last election was this mass voter turnout of our young folks. Souls to the poll. Those are young folks who came out, right? What conversations are happening with younger people and folks who aren't afraid to continue to move this needle so a space like that is blue doesn't go back and go red?
Yeah, but let me just say this, and then I really do have to go. But let me just say this. Part of the problem that we're dealing with, though, is, we have Black people in elected office, but they're not always for us.
That's right.
And this is lesson 2 that was learned in the book, Larry's book. He's going through, this evolution and recognizing, okay, we want to get Black people in power. We want to get Black people in power, and all our problems will be solved. But that's not true, because we have always had Black people who house Negroes, if you will, who
Annette, if you don't mind me jumping in, what this brother Glenn, I can't think of his name, he's former Vietnam vet. He actually is the editor, creator of theblackagenda.com. He calls them the misleadership class. Their job is to keep us confused, in chaos, divert our attention. It's not about us. They work on behalf of the neoliberal system, right? Knowingly and unknowingly. And so, that poses a problem, because their loyalties are not to the people who put them in, it's to whoever their campaign.
And so that is a problem down here, because we should not be having these problems that we're having. We just shouldn't. There are, with the county board looking as it does, there are only 2 white people on the county board. Okay. There are 5 people on the board. 3 of them are Black. Okay. And then the president of that board is Black. So we should not be having the problems that we're having, but we are, because there's a whole lot of fighting among ourselves And there's a lot of stuff going on that this just should not be happening. And so
I'm sorry, I wanted to just say, and you're absolutely right. A lot of this goes back to the doctrine of Christian dominant discovery, which is the baseline for this country. The other part, and I'll talk about later because I know you got to go, but the doctrine basically said it was created over the course of 60 years by 2 or 3 popes that said 4 things. One is that wherever Europeans go, it belongs to them. So Christopher making a mistake coming, it didn't matter, it belongs to them. 2, they're superior to everybody else. 3, you must be subjugated by them. And 4, you must accept their religion. And they were able to sustain this because they created a weapon out of the Europeans when they made their way over to China. They took something for celebration that today has evolved to a weapon that can annihilate everything on the planet, if not the planet itself. Right. And even though they were all related to each other, Belgium, France, Germany, all of them, they fought all the time. And because they fought now they're all related to each other because they have the most efficient weapon that allowed them to sustain the doctrine all around the world. So they start with indigenous people here in the Western Hemisphere, then it goes to Africa, and then Asia, and then India when the British go. So that's like at the foundation of this. But we have actually, and I use affirmative action, you can use whatever date, but I'm gonna say affirmative action, use it as a benchmark. When we were able to leave ourselves, integration, which some people talked about, but when we had the ability to leave, one of the things that happened, we began to abandon a culture that sustained us for 600 years in this place. Not only did we abandon it, we began to embrace somebody else's. Not only did we embrace it, but we're advancing at the peril. And I've seen this. I've been watching this since the 1980s. We're abandoning at the peril of our own culture and our children. So when I remember the first time I heard a child killing somebody over 8-ball jacket. I grew up in Newark in the Central Ward, which was the toughest ward. If you were a Black man or Puerto Rican and you couldn't box, you were a punk. To have a weapon was a problem culturally because people would say you were a punk for having a gun. So you would be ostracized. At best, somebody had a 22 on rare occasions. And if there was a weapon, it was a switchblade. But people, you can fight with somebody, it'd be your friend for 50 years. But it changed during the course of my life. And who else is on here? It's about my age. Okay. So it changed over the course of that time. And
we're not going to worry about the age question today.
Yeah, we're looking at children and we're imposing expectations on them when they weren't here. They have no idea what it's like when you tell them in, so I could tell you when I was talking to the children in this meeting we had, the community meeting, and I was telling them what it was like there were no guns before the drugs came. And I explained to them why the drugs came, why the heroin came, and the crack cocaine came, and how that's 60 years, right? That's 3 generations. That's a grandfather, a father, and a son. And so now what you're talking about, the misleadership collapse, and I have to tell you, just as an aside, 25 years ago, I said, what happened in the African continent? The what is it? The underdevelopment of the African continent is what's happening in urban cities around this country. Right. The same script, right? The same script. The same script. It's one for one. The only thing now, gentrification is replacing taking gold and diamonds from places. We got, other things for people to take. So, that's stuff that we don't know. A lot of people don't know.
Oil is all that land that the Palestinians are being displaced on. Ding dong.
Right. Yeah, right.
But they did that to indigenous people here. It's
That's the playbook. That's the playbook for settler colonialism. Right. Absolutely right.
Nice meeting you.
Nice when you too. I gotta go.
I'm sure you, Annette, here on your leaving word, I met a young lady and I said, Annette Austin, I remember her. I was like, yeah, she's retired. She wrote a book. Annette, they were so somebody's fanning you out there. I just want to
all right.
So
I hope I see everyone at the book signing next week. All right.
And in closing, you gotta close. You can't close and let us know what book signing. What books? Harriet Tubman book? What book?
That's because you got here late.
That's why we gotta say it in closing.
Lawrence Ham, A Life in the Struggle. A Life in the Struggle. And yeah, and this is a long time coming. And this
Public
brother
Library next
definitely,
Saturday. What time?
it's gonna be from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And then
Right.
and don't forget Friday.
Yeah.
Young journalists, if you're a young journalist, you want to be there in Montclair at the Universalist Church. And that's going to be from 5 o'clock to 6:30.
And that's going to be in Montclair, New Jersey.
Yes.
Right. So let's make sure we get out and support Annette Austin, the author, and support our brother Larry next Friday and Saturday, y'all. And Annette, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All
Love you.
roads lead to
Love you too.
Montclair.
All right.
All right.
Hey, and tell Mom we said hey there.
I will. She's a little upset at me right now, but she'll be fine.
Hey,
We love her.
Mom. Hey,
Get
Mom.
behind, Mom.
As we transition, you said one thing, Professor Carter.
I
In that
never-
last, you
Let
said
me, first off, Donna, let me say Professor Carter came blazing, right? The
yes.
only reason I didn't jump in because it was strong black power, right? I didn't say nothing because she was on point, right? And I knew Annette had to go, but I mean, you know, Professor Carter, you came in blazing, sister. I want you to keep going because you're right on target. I mean, that's the history of how we got to where we are.
Well, before you say, you said
library did for me. The Newark Public Library, we didn't have a television, so we spent a lot of time at the Newark Public Library. Y'all turn on your phones, we went up to the library.
Yeah.
so. But there's one thing you said before Annette left, that you were in the room with Zaid and you were talking to young people, and before the heroin came and Ford Company came, you said before the crack cocaine came. And I want you to pick up there because that's what we're going to be talking about. Crack cocaine came. And
Well, let me just
you go ahead. Go
Before
ahead.
you do that, okay, first of all, people need to understand, and you could check with Chancellor Williams had done something. He was the author of Destruction of Black Civilization. Actually, it may still be on YouTube for people interested, but the heroin came in response to the women's movement, the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, the Young Lords, and the anti-war movement. And it was purposely the FBI and organized crime got together purposely to put this in our communities. And one thing, going back to Edward Bernays, who's the nephew of Sigmund Freud, who was really the architect or the grandfather of the whole thing of marketing, advertisements, political spin. This was a gentleman, just as a side, real quickly, get some context. He was Sigmund Freud's nephew. He was the architect of getting us to buy things. Well, we weren't in that economy, not that way. But for regular white people, they were able, well, he convinced them that they should buy things that they want and not just what they needed. And he used artists. I call it the Beyonce effect. He used Mary Pickford, silent film actors, to convince these people to do that. Then he was excellent in group thought. He got us into World War I. When women were trying to get the vote during the suffrage, he got women to smoke cigarettes. And what he did, he used, like people still do today, the same script. They use what the wealthy do to get people to want to do it too. So they brought out the debutantes, the granddaughters and daughters of the Carnegies, the Vanderbilts, all the really wealthy people at the time. And Easter parade, which used to be a really big deal, even during my lifetime, used to be a really big deal, to get them to pull the cigarettes out of their stockings, and the stockings were silk. Polyester hadn't been invented yet. And that was what he did. And the last thing was probably is interesting. The hardest job he ever had was convincing people to, women in particular, to use cake mix. And I just happen to remember that, to use instant cake mix. I can't remember what company he was working for, if it was Betty Crocker or one of those companies, but it was very hard because the socialization of women at that time was, if you're not, and cooking scratch is what everybody did. It wasn't like you go to a fast food store, all these ways that people eat, this wasn't happening. But it was very hard for him to convince them to do that. And the only way he was able to get them to do it, he had to say, you're contributing. Because if they felt they weren't contributing to the process of preparing food for their family, then you couldn't get them to do it. And that was his hardest job. How he did it is egg and milk. They say, okay, if you need to contribute to egg and milk, and that made the women feel, okay, I'm doing something and I'm involved in it. Other than that, he had a really hard time. And I will tell you that he worked from the turn of the century to the Clinton administration. And I would encourage people to look at it. There's a book called Propaganda, because he's the founder, the grandfather of propaganda. I would tell you to, take a look at that. So that goes to Edward Bernays. But one of the things was marketing. In order to convince Blacks and Puerto Ricans to use heroin, it had to be cool. Because, you know, we got style. We got to do stuff cool. So to use, they used, and they did this to get us to do it. Then later on, you have
came at our jazz musicians.
Right. And not long afterwards, you have crack. Now, crack, you're looking at what's happening in Russia for those of you who are younger, and you see this whole Russian thing, but this goes back like 40 some years, if not long time ago. Basically, what happens that the Afghanis are paid by the CIA, or they funded by the CIA against the Soviet Union, because it was Soviet Union then. The Soviet Union collapsed because they did what we're doing now. We spend a whole lot of money on war. And so they had bread lines and all kind of stuff going on because, you know, the economy was hurt. But the Afghanis, who have a long memory, the British will tell you that, kicked the Soviet Union's butt, but they did it with money that was coming through, that money that came from the crack in our neighborhoods, Newark, Philadelphia, all the communities you could think of. And the money was running through Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Guatemala. So when people are looking at immigrants, keep in mind that this had great impact on people coming here because it contributed to the cartels. That's how you got the cartels. You got the cartels because the money that was funding Afghanistan, or the Mujahideen, the money that was funding them against the Soviet Union, we were paying for it in our communities in a whole lot of different ways. And the money was running through those countries. And so people started coming here from those countries as a result of that. Now, I lived in California, and I said this before, in the third wealthiest community on the planet, because it was and I'm not saying that to brag, it's just I figured if they could live like that, people in Newark should be like that too.
It's a big economy.
And I will tell you that they had more millionaires per square foot than any other place on the planet in the 1980s. Well, during that time, going back to crack, Maxine Waters and Dick Gregory were holding hearings outside in South Central, right? And there's a gentleman who wrote about, his name is Gary Webb. He wrote a book, I can't remember right now, but Gary Webb, he wrote for the San Jose Bee. Did a whole series. And when he wrote the series initially, he was getting, wow, this is really information the American public doesn't know, because the American public knew more then than they do now. I mean, I did voter registration in California. We registered 800,000 people in the state of California. We could do that because civics was still kind of present. People still had an idea of what's going on.
Froze. Well, as she unfreezes, let me help her, because I'm going to say this. The era that she's talking about, the particular reason why that time and circumstance was developed, because they were afraid of the children of the Black Liberation Movement, our generation. They came at our generation with everything to make sure that we do not at least duplicate what happened with the generation before us in the Black Liberation Movement. The drug onslaught was deliberate and done over two generations, not just to criminalize us, as folks liberally try to talk about in sociological circles, but to prevent, as an extension or an additional arm to COINTELPRO, to prevent the emergence of a full-fledged movement that had the political intent, the radical political intent of the Black Liberation Movement when they came and destroyed the Black Panther Party, assassinated Dr. King, Fred Hampton, and locked up a whole lot of our political prisoners. I got out of the street from selling just as cocaine and crack was really beginning.
I'm back. I'm back. All right, where was I? So real quick, I'm sorry, audience, that was me. It was my fault this time.
Well, was Zaid picked up, and he was at the point that he got out just before. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
So anyway, thank you, Zaid. Thank you so much. So
the book was Dark Alliance, the CIA.
Yeah, Dark Alliance, exactly. And the interesting thing, and it's not unusual in this country, you were talking about fascism when I came in. What happened is that he magically killed himself with 2 bullets and with the wrong hand. Like, in other words, if he was left hand, he committed suicide with the other hand, but he did it with 2 bullets, which was interesting. So those are the kind of things were happening. And so when we look at what's happening, we're talking about 55, 60 years and the influence that has on people today. So when you talk about crack, that's the background. Now, the other thing real quick with regard to young ladies, because, you know, Kima, what you were going to ask me about, we talked about briefly. Kimba, I'm sorry. One of the things to realize is that by the time you get to, and I'm switching systems here as we're talking, by the time you get to crack, doing heroin, you still had enough people in the community. You still had cultural protections that existed for the time that, for that particular time. You still had some cultural protections. So you had people my age who could fill in and be the neighbor, Miss Brown or whatever, with the heroin. When the crack comes, the churches, the mosque, all those cultural institutions that used to be supportive have evolved to something else, and they're not there. So, and when I tell people, I say, you know, everybody wasn't doing crack, but just to give you an example, if I'm a young lady and I'm on it, and being a mother must be a very powerful thing. I was never a mother, but I can see it's a very powerful relationship with the children, no matter what. You getting high in the crack house, and because you don't have Miss Brown you can leave your children with, so you there with your children trying to be a mother at the same time. People are doing things to your children. The rate of sexual assault as a result of the crack epidemic, and people talk about it in terms of, you know, the other things, but the rate of sexual assault, it doesn't mean that people aren't, you know, they have different sexual ways of performing, because culturally, if you look at other cultures, some of the things we talk about is different. But you had a lot of young people who could be very much confused about their sexuality because they've been sexually assaulted, because there's been nobody for their parents to leave them with, or their mother in particular live with. And then you have the whole prison system, right? 3 strikes, all of these things. So now I just wanted to give that little context, and you can ask me specific questions.
Okay.
I want to
So
add
we,
well,
well,
I would add to what, because it's important.
because I want to get to the topic, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's important to appreciate this, the uniqueness about that particular wave and that particular kind of drug is that, and she alluded to it, not only did it break down stable places in the community, but for the first time, you are seeing an interruption, a spiritual, cultural, material interruption in one of the most basic relationships in the world that we did not even see on the plantation. And that is for us to lose our capacity to mother and the parent.
Right.
Unprecedented.
Right.
Fallout that we see in our streets now with all this violence can be traced directly to that.
Exactly.
People don't understand, but when I used to have my troops in the streets, I'm talking about my days with the new Black Panther Party, we shut a street down. One of the first things I would do before we would take on our knuckleheads is that I would apologize to the community. And it was like, damn, what's this Panther apologizing about? Because it was our generation that did not see the sinister elements of what we were running to seeking a good time that wound up destroying our capacity to parent, that got our kids all messed up. And we need to own that.
But there was also, Saeed, there was also the music. The music was our superpower. They knew the music our superpower. And even today, what is happening with the industry is that you have people in the industry is heavily invested in private prisons. So you have young people who are not familiar with, they don't have a lot of cultural background. Like I said, that's been for a while. So all they know when they go in, you know, people say if you use the itch word or these different words, then that's the only way your music's going to sell. So 2 things are happening. And I just went on a conference with, I have to do continuing legal education classes. It was about prosecutors and how prosecutors are prosecuting these children around the country, right? So the music executives are heavily invested in prisons. They know that these songs potentially put these young people in positions where they could be prosecuted for what they say, which is a First Amendment, but they don't do anything. And the young people don't know that music was our superpower. So when we kind of lost that, you know, the music, and other people started co-opting it and controlling it, and that's a whole nother conversation itself. That became easier for people to co-opt our children's minds. And then there's some other institutions have been developed since then where people have taken advantage and they've actually, you know, and I will just say that people coming out of chattel slavery knew you never give your children to your oppressor. And what they would do, they knew they're coming out of chattels. They didn't have the formal education we have, and that probably worked for them. They knew you never gave your children to the people who oppressed you. And what you had to do if you wanted to be a teacher, you had to prove that they could be trusted, that your children, that, yeah, right, that they could trust you with their children's minds. That was fundamental. Can I trust you with my children's mind? You just can't be a teacher. I have to be able to trust you. And then after they determined whether or not they could trust you, people would put their little bit of money together and send them to a place called Oswego, New York, to learn how to be a teacher. But you don't get to be a teacher unless you could be trusted, because they knew coming out of chattel slavery, whoever controls your children's minds controls your culture and your economy and ultimately your entire community.
So, Professor Carter.
Okay, you asked your question now.
A question. I went to Shaw University, and during that time, there was a magazine called Emerge that had a breaking story, and it was during the crack cocaine era. And the story simply said Kimba, Kemba, and it had a picture of a beautiful black girl in her graduation uniform on the cover. And the story probably had to be 5 to 8 to 10 pages long and captivating. One might say a short story. And the story just, and that was in 80s, 90s. And on February 22nd, that story finally broke in a film. And Kemba came to the film, and it's a story about a young suburban black girl who was raised in Richmond, Virginia, went to Hampton University. And you there, Professor Carter? We lost you again. And she, as you know, you get on campus, you get in college, and when you get in college, and especially if you were in a protected environment, once you go away to college and you begin to let go, get free, you're on campus by yourself, your parents are no longer there, you live into the rules of your own. And she falls in love with the wrong young man and want to wait for her to come back. Zay, do you remember? You're on.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember that. In fact, I have a piece that I wrote for on Kimba Smith. Right. The long and the short of that is that in her falling in love with this wrong person as a partner, right? He was involved in the drug trade. She wound up doing time by virtue of her association with him, and it was serious time. And it was a horrible story. She was fortunate to have for somebody to get that story out and to mobilize support from her, but she took a hard fall that was characteristic of how the drug trade was crushing through our community during that time. And so yeah, we remember that story very well.
And it was, and as the lawyer said in the movie, the war on drugs gone wrong. And you talk about the laws that came out and
actually
how
it was going just as it was intended to go. But go ahead.
Okay. And so she adds, and in the story, you might say at the climax, she was about to sign off on plea agreements, and that's a whole nother lesson on signing off on plea agreements. But they were talking about 24 months, which is 2 years. And the story comes that oh, okay. Hey, that the story goes on that the young man is no longer, he got killed in the mist. They didn't want Kimba, they wanted the young man. So as they're agreeing on her plea agreement, because she had to do some time, he goes wrong. So now somebody has to be punished, and the judge goes to sentence her. And what was thought to be 24 months, and it's in the movie, they depicted it good because they showed a lawyer reading, and he's like surprised, and because he's looking and the numbers, and then it goes to the scene with the judge. And he was saying, the judge goes on to say that his hands is tied, he can't do anything, the war on drugs, but now you understand the consequences of your decision, and therefore you will be locked up for a total of 294 months. And it goes, the courtroom, and anybody, you as your parent, everybody, nobody, I don't could have ever expected that. 24 and a half years. She goes on. She served 6.5 of those years. She receives clemency from President Clinton, and that's how the story goes. But it's, the story is out on February 22nd and is streaming on BET. And I have to say, from reading I can remember reading that article and Emerge and being like a page turner. And I have to say, they did that article, her life stories, justice. And I also want to say, Zay, you may remember this. She definitely came to Essex County College.
Yeah.
But as I remember, one of her first stops may have been Essex County College.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's it. So that's what I wanted to, basically talk about that case. So we got as far as telling about the case. Go ahead, Professor Carter.
Well,
And
yeah, I mean, that goes back to the time, that was all new to
her. We have another author here. Welcome, sister. And you can join in the situation. I see
just jump in.
Just jump in. Okay.
Yeah. I would just say that goes, that when I talked about crack and how it happened, right? All of this is new to our community. This is all new. It's not that there weren't heroin or whatever. They were basically in the music. I mean, you talk about the jazz community, but it wasn't the way it had been. And now you have women in it. And this was innocent, right? But the whole thing, the judge had no discretion. The 3 strikes, like, you got hit no matter what. And you said you were absolutely right. I heard you say the end of it. I apologize. I went off again. Is that they had very little discretion. But also keep in mind, and I need to go back really quickly, about 60 years ago, because this goes to it. About 60 years ago in Urbana, Illinois, there was a meeting of everybody involved in construction, particularly construction of military bases. And they decided they were no longer building military bases. They were going to be building prisons. These were the attorneys, the architects, people who owned the property, people who owned the steel industry. They were all involved in this almost 60 years ago. So they had identified the population that was going to be in prison. Not only did they identify them, they had also decided that they wanted to make sure that the laws would guarantee that you have people in prison. So then with her, you start having more women entering the prison, because in 1972, I was a volunteer at Rawway State Prison. Around that time was still the end of the Great Migration, people coming from the South. At that time, 80% of the people in prison were white, and there were very few women. So now you have a situation at the time that this happens, where not only are you having a transition from 80% white, Italian, Irish, Polish, Italian, because many of us are not quite here. We're still coming up from the South, to a point where now women are becoming part of. Now, there have been women in prisons along the way, but the numbers were very scant. They were very scant. Nobody was keeping accountable like they are right now. And not only was it changing, it was changing where you had primarily white women in prison. And now, because of the heroin, not the heroin, well, the heroin more so, but the crack, you're starting to have, and again, you don't have anybody. In her instance, she had family. She was very fortunate. And she was not the typical person you would expect to be in that situation in the first place. But love, what did Tina Turner say? What's love got to do with it?
So, Professor Carter, do you remember when she came to Essex?
I don't know when she came. And I was there 30 years. She had to be there when I was there. I just don't remember, because Dr. Davis and I, my colleague, who was the head of the criminal justice program. So she must have been brought in through another program, and I just wasn't aware of it. But I would remember that because all my students had to read an article about her. Yeah. The same article you talked about that was Esquire, that's the article that I distribute to all my classes.
The Emerge article. Well, one of the things that starts, so the lawyer, because actually the lawyer who started her case was horrible. And then Elaine, is it Jones from the Legal Defense Fund steps in, and then she brings the Legal Defense Fund, and then she brings 2 women with her to go to Kim's house to visit her. And surprisingly, the women that she brings with her is Marsha Fudge, who was not elected at that time, and the head of the Links. And they organized and they want, because the family had already been writing letters, and Bobby Rush was was a congressional member at that time, and he was on top of it, and they were doing what they needed to do, but they amplified it. But there were a couple of things, and I can remember Jesse Jackson taking on this too. The simplicity that if it was crack cocaine, you got discharged, but if it was powder cocaine, you got discharged, and it was substantially different. And because more blacks.
That is the Clinton, Biden contribution to the war on drugs, by the way.
There was, and they actually show that. Yes, they do. So, and I think it's something that they go back at a time, and that it's released now. Do you know? Is there anything that is still on the war of drugs that you would say that this still needs to be go back? That we still need to go back and correct? I know with the marijuana that has kind of changed. That everybody got locked up. They changed. Now it's legal. What would you say in terms of war of drugs? Are there still things that need to be corrected?
I don't think there should be a war on drugs. It served the purpose for increasing policing. That was one of the major contributions. I don't know if you know, during the Lyndon Johnson's administration, what was happening while he was helping people with these public funds in the cities, he was increasing the budget of the police. The war on drugs helped create an environment that helped support and encourage more policing. That was a benefit of it. It increased budgets of policing. I think that it didn't work. It's clear now. I mean, people probably knew it didn't work either then. They probably knew it wasn't working because their motivation for having it wasn't, they didn't have good intentions from the beginning. It was about, if you go back and listen to Richard Nixon, this was about controlling a certain population, which Saeed knows the population is always us. So you always have to figure out how you're going to gatekeep people, right? And that was a way to justify gatekeeping us.
It was a gateway to what we now call mass incarceration. We need to
exactly. And that's big business. All these things we're talking about, not only we're in a capitalist system, we're in a neo-capitalist system where everything is a dollar. And it's sad to say people might think it's only good intentions, but sometimes I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say, well, people end up abusing things. But unfortunately, a lot of these policies are created and we're not sitting in the room. I mean, people who think like us are not sitting in the room. They could be looking like us, but they're not thinking like us. And their intentions they may not look at it in terms of what it's going to look like in 20, 30 years. But in the time I've been around, I realized there have been a lot of decisions made in the 70s that are coming to fruition now. And I mean, you guys talked about this earlier about Trump. I heard something about him. Actually, the Heritage Foundation, which is a think tank, if you don't know about think tanks, learn about them because they actually draft policy and give them to your elected officials to pass on state and local and federal levels. The Heritage Foundation actually wrote a paper where they're basically saying what the game plan is for dismantling or undercutting administrative agencies, particularly on the federal level. When I read about this in November, they had 75 think tanks that joined them. Now it's over 400. They have a game plan for Trumpism. They don't care about Trump, but what he's managed to accomplish in terms of people and the mindset of many Americans, they're thrilled about this because a lot of things they've been trying to do since Franklin Roosevelt, they can see they can accelerate. And so there are a couple of papers I refer people to. One is Crisis in Democracy, which comes out of the Black Power, in response to the Black Power, the Young Lords, and the anti-war movement said basically, how dare these young people expect the elites to be accountable to them? Then there's another paper called the Powell Memorandum. Powell, who was the attorney for the Chamber of Commerce, later became a Supreme Court justice. Actually, they wrote this paper in response to Franklin Roosevelt. How dare you be one of us, an elite, and keep us from having a feudal society after the crash of 29? And if you don't know, President Roosevelt's family made their money off the opium trade. And then you had during the Bush administration, you had the Project for a New American Century that has a lot to do with controlling the resources of oil in the Mediterranean, because there's no such place as the Middle East. It's either East Africa or West Asia. So a lot of these things are 50 years. I mean, right now, the Heritage Foundation sees the opportunity to do this in January, if there's a, depending on what happens. So when you talk about the young lady, she got caught up in policies that were probably written, things that people had made decisions about before and kind of knew, like the war, going back to the war on drugs. I'm sorry, I lost my train for a minute. The war on drugs, they knew what they were doing. They have a good sense of what the outcome is going to be. So there shouldn't have been one. It was focused on us, like mostly it's focused on us, and it shouldn't exist. And you look at all the things that came out of it, the mindset of many people, particularly in our community. There are people in our community agree with it.
And as we begin to transition to our next set, I want to ask one question. You said in our community, you had the Mrs. Browns, the churches there. And I think you were referring like when heroin was running rampant, but they were there to help protect, and so certain things wouldn't happen.
Cultural protections.
Cultural
protections. Mm-hmm.
I can remember during the crack cocaine when our county executive was running for election and he was coming in. And our Congressman Payne Sr. was bringing him in doing coffee clutches and bringing him into the community so that people can meet him so that he could be successful in his run. And I remember being at one meeting, and in that meeting, it was at my mom was hosting the meeting, and it was all of the women of the women on the block, the elder women on the block. And I can remember them, because the crack cocaine just came fast, vicious, that they looked at Congressman Payne and Joey, well, if we elect you, can you bring, and they asked, one of the women asked, can you bring the, what's the army, the
National Guard?
The National Guard. Can you bring the National Guard in so they can take, and I remember being young and I'm still in college, like, Miss Mildred, you really want the National Guard to come in our community? You know what you asking? So it was so. I guess I don't know. It just came, from their perspective, how they saw it in their eyes. They just wanted it gone. And when they asked those questions, and then the response, Clinton passed the legislation, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, but you're right. That was the mindset. You scare people. Americans get scared really easily. When I hear people say things like, as a result of 9/11, and I hear people say, be careful. We never said be careful. We said, see you later, which is a much more positive. Even our language, how we think, how we see things, have a lot to do with fear. And it's interesting, as a person of African ancestry, all the things we've been through, what are we afraid of? And for those who have a higher power, what are you afraid of? We've been given this amazing gift, the human brain, right? And a lot of our problems could be solved with it. But that's not the socialization that we're going through. So when you talk about the tanks, I remember hearing people saying, bring them in. What was that going to do? It wasn't going to change the situation. And I was here in 1967 when the rebellion, and I remember there were sharpshooters sitting on top of Scudder Home's roofs, aiming in our house, and tanks surrounding our buildings. So I know that it was nothing that they could do about drugs. If anything, they could be co-conspirators unknowingly, because a lot of the drugs came in through the military.
So they would bring them in those tanks.
Well, I don't know about that, but
no, I'm just smiling.
Yeah, I understand.
Professor Carter, thank you as always for coming on. It's time to get back to your civics hours, so you have to schedule some time to come in, because this election is serious, and if people are scared to register and organize and vote, we have to just keep working and doing the work.
And we can't wait till the last minute, and that's what we do. It's the last minute. We should have been, people should have been getting ready since the first day of the last administration. But we wait to the last minute and we want to pull it out. And it's interesting. I'm not a fan of either party, but I will tell you that at some point we're down to whether or not we'll have a chance, going back to Zai's point about fascism. At some point, we're like at this little thin line of whether or not we'll have the opportunity to vote again, but we still have the ability to put in people on the state and local level who can check whoever the president is. Right.
And
so
before you leave us, Tell us what you're listening to, and if you want to, I know you recently started a new foundation. If you don't want to talk about it now, you could talk about it later.
No, it's
Just give us the name of the foundation and tell
okay.
us what song, what hip hop artist, individual or group do you listen to that inspires you when you're doing your work?
Well, unlike the other generation, I can't exactly listen to things while I'm studying. But, Tupac is, and that's because his parents were Black Panthers. I know, so the Tupac's my man. And there are other people that I like, but right now he's always in the front of my mind. I can always come up with him. In terms of the foundation, it's actually was funded by students. When I completed my paid service, notice I didn't walk away from Essex County College. The students gave me enough money to start a foundation. I mean, that's what I did. And it's only 2 years old. We did manage to give some scholarships last year. And I had a meeting right before to look at what our game plan is going forth. But the mission is for young people who are interested, who want to compete in a global level, to provide them with the resources, and not always money. It could be money, but it also can be tutoring, because tutoring I found is really critical for especially students who have not had a really solid academic foundation because no one thought they were important enough or valuable enough. So that's a little bit about the foundation. So thank you for letting me talk about it, but I got to go. Plus my mouth is hurting from talking so much.
All right. See you soon. Thank you.
All right. Take care. You guys have a good evening.
You too.
Let me get out.
Mouth they never heard him telling that tale. Powerful segue. Good segue for our next guest, a comrade and friend of mine who I'm supremely proud of. It's not an accident of history that this conversation that we're about to have is taking place on March 1st, the beginning of women's history, right? And there's there's a whole lot of history there that needs to be claimed, uncovered, and really addressed in a real way. Thandisizwe Chimurenga returns, and Thandisizwe has dropped a new book out on a moment in time that often gets overlooked, dismissed, and kind of let go. That was wrong for that to happen. It was a weakness of our community, of our movement, to let go what was let go. The book is What We Stood For, the story of a revolutionary Black woman, and it's a story that is loaded with trauma. Now, for those of y'all know how I work in trauma-informed responses to community-based violence intervention, and you cannot have any kind of healing and reconciliation without acknowledgement of harm. And at the heart of this story is a harm that was done within the confines of what should have been one of the safest places for our people to be who we need to be, within the confines of the Black liberation movement, right? In the way that absolutely should not have happened and should never happen ever again. So we want to bring her in and talk about the story of Deborah Jones, and why that story is important to discuss, even though it happened some decades ago, because it has never been meaningfully addressed. Come on in here, Comrade Queen. Come on in and talk about this latest jewel that you just dropped.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I'm a co-author. I did not write the story or a biography of someone with their permission, or someone who's passed on. This was a cooperative effort between Deborah Jones and myself. It is her story as told to me through interviews, through an oral history interview, utilizing the transcripts, utilizing my separate interviews with her one-on-one and the answers she gave to me. So I'm helping her to tell her story because it needed to be told. And her story, I was speaking earlier today and I was telling people, every year in December, if not earlier, right around Kwanzaa time, people who have an axe to grind with cultural nationalism, who have an axe to grind with Maulana Karenga, who have an axe to grind with the US organization, one of the things that they always say is, well, he tortured two sisters, right? They tortured two sisters, two Black women. but they never ever say who these Black women were. They never ever mention their names. Who are these women? Where are these women? What are they doing? And if it hadn't been for Scott Brown's book, Fighting for Us, which came out in 2003, I don't know if I would have ever known their names. And Deborah's been right here in Los Angeles the whole time. So Deborah Jones and Gail Davis were members of the US organization. And in 1970, Mother's Day weekend, they were tortured at the behest of Maulana Karenga, co-founder of the US organization. Over the weekend, 3 days, and at one point, after the torture occurred, after they were released, Deborah's family said, we're going to put him through the justice system. We're going to call the police, and he's going to go to jail. So Deborah testified against Karenga in court, resulting in a sentence of 1 to 10 years. His wife, Tia Moyo, and 2 other members of the US organization were also convicted and sentenced to prison. And after 4 years, Karenga was released. He was able to remake himself and rebuild himself and the US organization at that time. And I say that because the US organization was a very formidable force here in Los Angeles during that time period. During the COINTELPRO machinations and the acrimony that was exacerbated because of COINTELPRO, the deaths, the murders, assassinations of Bunchy Carter and John Huggins on the campus of UCLA, it was a shocking, horrifying event, and people opinion began to turn away from the US organization. When Deborah and Gail were tortured the following year, 1970, that was like the final nail in the coffin. People were like, we can't mess with those folks, them US folks. But after he was released from prison, again, he was able to rebuild and remake himself. And he's known today as the creator of Kwanzaa, a scholar of Black studies. The US organization still exists, but he has never acknowledged his role in what happened. He talked, the last I heard was, I guess it was 2022, when he was on a show on Black Power Media and said that there was no victim. There was no victim. He talks in terms of being a victim of COINTELPRO, being a victim of trumped up
political prisoners, and these were trumped up charges. And again, as I said, he stated that there was no victim, that this did not happen. And as I said, I'm looking in Deborah Jones's face. I have not met Edili, but Edili is somewhere on the East Coast.
Edili getting Gail Brown.
Gail Jones, Gail Davis, whose name was Edili at the time. They say that it did happen. So I want to, that's the background. But again, this is Deborah's memoir. This is her memory. My job was to help craft it into a way that it's digestible for the public, and to also provide background and context, get the book ready for publication. Deborah basically allowed me or asked me to be her co-author. And so we share that title, but this is her story. I had to resist the urge to fact check every single thing that she told me, because it was not my job to fact check. It's not like, again, this was a biography that I have written. It's a memoir. This is what she remembers. This is what she said happened. Somebody else can come and say what they remember, what they say happened. So when it's a memoir and you're helping someone tell their story, the quote unquote rules are a lot looser. And also I did not have to vindicate her. I didn't have to feel like I have to vindicate her. No. What did Nene Leak say? I said what I said. Deborah said what she said. If you don't want to believe her, fine. If you do believe it, that's fine too. But it's not it's not my job to prove, see, this is what, no, that wasn't my job.
And knowing that sometimes that is your job, how hard was it not to, was it blurred lines, or you was, I'm playing, this is the role I'm in and I'm comfortable?
Well, I couldn't, of course, I mean, as a journalist, I couldn't, I resisted the urge to fact check everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I fact checked some things.
Okay.
And I fact checked enough that I felt comfortable being a part of this project and helping her tell her story.
Okay. And
So
and
listen,
do,
go ahead, Dan. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, and being able to allow somebody, because all of us have a story, and
That's
to
right.
be able, and on a light note, I work in the office of permits. And if you violate the permit, you get a ticket. If you don't have the proper permit, you may get a fine. And
Mhm.
the way people enter my office is always with a story, and I know what's going on. And I sometimes I want to stop, and I like, no, it don't. But they really want to tell their story, and I mean, and I was like, I'm going to have a memoirs of my, and as I said, the memoirs of my office one day, and your story is going to be in it, because people, I have to sometimes give people 2 or 3 minutes, because even though I know the answer immediately, sometimes they just need to
People
tell
want to
their
be heard.
story.
Right. They want to
Yes.
be heard. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. So thank you for doing that. That's a beautiful. And
Mhm.
do you, and after as you were going through the whole process, and then when she gets the book in her hand, how, could you see um the joy, the
Well,
everything pour out?
actually, not trying
Hmm.
to throw my publisher under the bus, but we don't have our copies yet.
Oh,
But
you don't, because I'm online and seeing it, but okay.
yeah, we have the cover we made. I made posters of the
Hmm.
cover and I sent her one and she was very pleased. She's like, wow. Like now it's real now. Because
Right.
I met her in 2019. So
Okay.
this has been 5 years in the making.
Okay.
And we came through the tunnel. We kept seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, as they say. It kept getting brighter and brighter. And I'm just waiting for my copy in the mail. I hear it's here.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Good.
I have one on order. Haven't gotten it yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's back up and do several things. One,
Mm-hmm.
this brave sister is certainly not just what happened to her, right?
Hmm.
Right. Right.
What we stood for was this was somebody who grew up and saw the need to commit herself to the Black liberation movement. That's a story too, right? So
And
tell us
right.
about Deborah Jones.
She joined through the dance company.
Mm.
That's what caught her eye. She grew up at a time where, at that point, the US organization is founded in 65, right after the Watts Rebellion. 66 is when Kwanzaa is developed. 66 is also when the Black Panther Party comes on the scene. 67, Huey goes into prison for the shooting of the cop. 67, I believe, the Watts Summer Festival. If not 66, 67 is the Watts Summer Festival makes its appearance, and the dance troupe makes their first appearance during the Watts Summer Festival. Deborah joins in 68. This is before Bunchy Carter is killed. So she's a student at Fremont High School at the time, which was the major Black high school in South Los Angeles. It's down the street from the Black Panther Party office. So this area is like a hub of activity, of politics, of Black nationalism. There was even and I think it was called the Red Guards. There was a Chinese communist organization there.
Mm-hmm.
So Deborah grew up knowing members of the Slawsons who would go on to become Panthers. One of her high school boyfriends was a Panther. She knew that she was an African woman and a nationalist, she says, since she was 9 years old. And one of her neighbors down the block was a brother by the name of M. Samaji, who would go on to be an early member of the US organization. So she had been exposed to this type of activity and knowledge at an early age. And she's like, that's who I am. That's what I am. She knew about Nelson Mandela. She knew about the struggles at a young age going on in the continent, as well as the civil rights movement. She said, you know what? That's who I am. That's what I want to be a part of. And so even though she knew Panthers and were around them, I want to call it the trappings is what attracted her. Because she identified, she said her mother thought she was going to be a debutante. or maybe a congresswoman. She's like, I'm an African woman. I'm a nationalist. And in her book, she talks later on about how her mother was horrified that she was cavorting with wild-eyed nationalists. But she joins the US organization, and then she almost immediately leaves Los Angeles, touring with the Taifa dance troupe for about a year, traveling all over the country doing African dance. By the time they get back in 69, Bunchy and John have been killed, and now the US organization is in a crisis. So the dance company ceases to exist, and she's now involved in some of the day-to-day goings on of the organization, and she begins to see, wait a minute, this isn't right. What I'm seeing, this is not cool. And it was kind of like the beginning of the end, leading up to the next year, 1970, when she and Gail Davis, Edie are tortured.
And what was she seeing that wasn't right?
She talked about the fact that men would be fed first by the women. The women would have to stand behind the men. She says that the women and children would get what was left over in terms of the food. She said she was at a meeting one night, or I don't know if it was a meeting or a gathering, but she saw a man point to a woman and say, you're going to have sex with me tonight. So, what we know as male chauvinism, patriarchy, and how it plays out amongst the Black community. These are the kinds of things that she saw. In addition to some other things that she mentions in the book that I'm not sure, I won't say I'm not sure I should mention it now, but if you read the book, you'll see some of the things she's talking about in terms of the promotion of, the man is the head, he is the sum of all beings, and the woman should be submissive.
Yeah, liberation without liberating Black women.
Exactly. Liberation with the domination of Black women. And this is, I don't remember what year the Moynihan report came out. Was it 65? It may have been, or maybe it was 66. Yeah, I don't remember. But it sounds like the Moynihan report in blackface.
So now let's move ahead, because this is horrific stuff that these two incredible sisters endured. How did they cope? How were they able to move on with their lives? And what have they done since then in the name of moving on?
Well, and again, this goes back to the fact-checking aspect. I was not put in touch with Gail Davis. I have not spoken to her. I do not know how she coped, how she went through the rest of her life. My understanding is that she is still alive. What my understanding of it is that she was very good friends with James Mtume. And as we always say, Mtume, Juicy Fruit Mtume,
some of us here.
yes, Juicy Fruit Mtume, who was a member of the US organization in the beginning also, but left early on and returned to the East Coast. When Gail, after the torture, Gail went back east and met up with Mtume and his wife at the time. And that was how the interview with Scott Brown was facilitated for inclusion in the book. He told me that she is not interested in giving interviews, not interested in talking about it anymore. That's it. Okay. In terms of Deborah, again, she's always been here in Los Angeles. I met her through the Tom and Ethel Bradley Center at Cal State Northridge. They have an oral history program, and they were making it a point to document the civil rights movement and civil rights activists in Los Angeles, and also the Black Power activists. And it was through the oral history of one brother in particular. I don't know if your people on the East Coast are familiar with him, but his name is Brother Kumasi. He was a prison organizer. Kumasi said, hey, y'all should interview Deborah Jones. And they were like, who's Deborah Jones? Deborah Jones, that's the one that testified against Chimurenga, the torture. They were like, oh my God, you know Deborah? He was like, yeah, she be at the Slauson reunion picnic out there at South Park. They was like, please bring this woman in. And he brought her in, and they were able to have the interview. So she's been here. She has not sought the limelight, but she's been here all along. And when you read the book, you see how she coped, or maybe she didn't cope. Maybe she didn't cope. She's better now. She's better now. She does have some lingering health effects from that torture, but she's better now. 50-something years later.
Now you mentioned that oral history project, Cal State Northridge. Is that David Horn territory? Is that David Horn?
That's where David Horn used to be. Yes.
Yeah. David Horn was a big help to me once upon a time, not long ago. Actually tried to get me into a space where I could get some kind of advanced credential that I've been trying to figure out for some 40 years now. And a serious Garveyite. I love that brother. But here's the thing that we need to absolutely glean, because there's patriarchy, there's sexism, but then there's also this thing called liberalism. The failure, the unwillingness to hold our people accountable when they betray us, when they come before us in any kind of unprincipled way, and when they harm us, right? No matter their stature or bravura or personality or charisma or any of that. This reminds me in a soft way, on a hard way, right? And I'm using this, and I'm very soft is not the word I want to use, right? One of the things that Malcolm is going through several different kind of reformations in Black imagination, but the healthy spaces is emerging. His voice, his longstanding voice in support of and honor of Black women, right? And when he was trying to form the OAAU and started those extensive trips abroad, folks do not realize that he left the organization. He left a sister in charge of the organization, and her name was Lynn Shiflett, right? And she faced so much hostility from the men in the organization that she not only wound up leaving, and of course Malcolm gets killed before he could even address all that, right? But she was so harmed by what she went through with these men, is that not only has she been erased from history, but she has not been able to, by virtue of her own pain and trauma, to come forward with her own story. And so when you drop this in my church, I said, God damn, this is decades overdue. And I appreciate you lifting up Scott. We brought Scott to North, right? When he did his book, right? And we several of us put our hands on Mtume about having that conversation with that young brother, because Scott is younger than us, right? But saw the need to take that dive into those critical unspoken spaces that we got to learn from. We got to own and learn from, right? And Mtume finally did that. He facilitated that brother coming this way. Miri went through his own experience with Maulana. Somebody who we lost, who was not a leading figure, but someone who left it. Amanifa Williams. We had a segment early on about Lawrence Ham and Adimu Chunga, but Amanifa Williams was the international ambassador for Adimu's organization. Amanifa left the Nation of Islam when they messed with Malcolm, and left the US organization when Chimurenga started losing his mind, right? And came back here and became a hell of a labor organizer, right? It became a grounding figure for those of us who are younger than him, and so some of us, and not a whole lot of us, have been trying to tell our community about somebody who once upon a time tried to finger Sada for the FBI, who's now the darling of the Democratic Party.
Got his own show on MSNBC. Had his own show on MSNBC. I don't know if he's still there.
Yeah. Right? Liberalism. Never held accountable for that. Right? And winds up becoming tools, right, for confusion and all those other things to get in our goddamn way. Pardon me for coming like that.
Pardon your English.
Yeah, so veteran organizer and radical that you are.
I wouldn't call myself a veteran organizer.
Yeah, you ain't.
I've been around. I ain't no organizer, but I've been around.
Yeah, you've been out here a minute. You've been out here a minute, right? And we see you, right? What are the lessons for us that
We've
come
got
from
to
this
stop.
important story?
We've got, well, there's a joke going around right now. The CIA, people talk about how the CIA dropped off crack in the black community, how they dropped off guns in the black community. There's a joke going around right now. The CIA is dropping off podcasting equipment in the black community, microphones and mixing boards and stuff. It might not be a joke. I don't know. But we have got to begin to deal with more critical thought, absolutely holding people accountable. But this cult of personality, the cult of personality, it might be a CIA op giving everybody a microphone. I don't know, but it's wild. But this cult of personality, refusal to think critically, the refusal to analyze, the refusal to call out, brother, make a phone call, send a text. Brother Zaid, I don't know about this. What you think? I need some help. Can somebody help me figure this out? That's one of the beauties of collective study. And with all this podcasting equipment and the internet, the world at our fingertips, we need more online collective study if we're not going to meet in the hood the way we used to do in the late 60s and 70s and the 80s. But we've got to deal with more critical thinking. We've got to deal with looking at this cult of personality. Like you talk about the whole issue of liberalism. Now understanding that criticism has been used negatively, has been used as a hammer, but we've got to deal with criticism and self-criticism. We've got to deal with critique. It doesn't mean that you a hater. It don't always mean that you hating.
That's right.
So we've got to investigate, interrogate. These are some of the lessons that we have to begin to incorporate, especially if we call ourselves activists, organizers, and organizations. Deborah's message in particular to specifically young women, not so old women, but young women, young men also, in this era of Me Too, Black Lives Matter, these movements and this activism. She says, your intuition is your friend.
Mm-hmm.
There may be
Ori.
right, Ori, exactly what we talk about with the Ori. There are people out there who do mean you harm, who may not mean you harm, but your Ori does not mean you any harm. Your intuition does not mean you harm. We have to, like I said, this is more geared toward the young people. Trust your intuition. If it don't seem right, it might not be right. Investigate and find out.
And Sister Tonda, what they used to say, if it don't feel right, trust that instinct in you. In the sports world, what's going through is what happened in Atlanta with the NFL player who was going, NFL players are known to go back to their communities and give back. And how he was just simply doing uh get the football play, the school age football play, and teach them the fundamentals of football and all of that. And then you had, like you said, the haters come and they want to jump him. And Stephen A. Cam Newton, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And Stephen A. Smith did it good. What are we doing in our community that we're not? Why do we want to be seen like that? Why? And we have to. What was that all about? Why? Why do we think that's okay? There were some things and my husband was just talking about how, you looked at one point that yeah, there was things that were just said at the table, and they didn't, everything wasn't for everybody, and then how we were told to maintain ourselves and everything. So it's interesting that you say that, and we have to, I guess, get back to the basics. And I don't know how we would do that, in a time where things are so easy to access. And
Well,
like you I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We can't the silence no more.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we talk about, well, you don't air dirty laundry. What you do is you clean the laundry.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. You don't air it. You clean the laundry. You wash it.
That's
Wash
right.
it.
The drawers is dirty. They torn. Take them off the line and either wash them again or get you some new drawers.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to begin to, and that's all one of the weapons that has been used horrifically and historically against women in particular, but also against men, against young men, against any particular marginalized group without power. And I'm talking about intraracial within the Black community as well as outside of the community. The weapon of silence. Don't tell. Don't tell. No, you got to tell. You got to talk about it. We have to talk about these things. We have to investigate, because I know for me, for myself, if someone is making accusations against Zaid, well, you know, Sister Donna, Zaid, blah, 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 but don't say nothing to him. No, we're going to go to Zaid. This is what's being said about you. What's up?
Right.
Either the whisper campaign is going to stop, or you're going to be confronted with your behavior. So I see nothing as, I see it as a win-win.
Right.
Either whoever is whispering, either Thandi gonna stop whispering in Donna's ear about Zaid, or we're gonna find out is Zaid really doing this, and let's stop it. So it's really a win-win situation for you, Zaid. I think.
No, that is the way that we do. Go back and go to the source. Yes.
Unless you're a narcissist, then you know it's not a win for you.
Tanya, this book comes on the heels of you also doing a 2-volume piece.
More stories, yes.
That's right. Some
Black women stories. Some of us are.
It's like a natural place to step into, right? But I mean, at this particular time of time, there should be a very serious time of introspection, reflection, and study, right, on the question of race and gender equity. We're still struggling with that big time. We don't want to have those conversations still. How you know, how do you, in your modest judgment, how do we foster or facilitate, you know, that kind of cultural shift that needs to happen within the ranks of our own spaces of struggle in our own community?
Well, we have to make space for these conversations. We have to make space for the conversation.
Yeah.
You know, adopting the attitude, oh, I don't want to hear that. That might be fine for an individual, but an organization claiming that it stands for justice, for liberation, an end to oppression, ain't no room for that.
Yeah, there's no acceptable oppression.
No, well, obviously, actually there has been.
You know, yeah.
It's supposed to be a new day, right?
Oh my God, yes. You know.
So,
yeah, loaded stuff. I'm looking forward to this book, and I'm saying that guardedly because that and it's you know, just the all of the twists of that moment. You know, they go through this obscene abuse. You know, Mother's Day weekend. You know, I mean, it's
no. It was important to talk about that. What happened? It was important to be graphic about it, but I know for me also it was important to hear about Los Angeles during that time period. One of my good friends, she's my elder, but she's my friend. She joined the Black Panther Party under the leadership of Bunchy Carter at the age of 16. And she talked about the fact that her mother was so horrified by that, she had her sent to juvenile hall.
Wow.
And I thought that was, I mean, I'm not going to say I disbelieved her. I just thought, wow. And then for Deborah to tell the story of how she was a runaway, but had this African consciousness. So her mother commits her to juvenile hall. You know, that was a thing back in the 60s.
Yeah.
You could request your child, if they were wayward and just it's just not working out. They not minding me. They not listening to me. I've quote unquote tried everything. Maybe you haven't, but you say I've tried everything.
You getting out of my house and then all out. Yeah,
not just put them out because you don't know what's going to happen. Send them to juvenile hall. And she talks about how that affected her, and also going to she was arrested one night. They were hanging out in front of the Panther office, and the police came and rounded up all the Panthers, and she thought she was going to go back to juvenile hall, but she ends up going to the women's prison, a place out here called Sybil Brand. And so she talks about that experience also. So learning and hearing about these things in Los Angeles at that time by someone who experienced it was an interesting experience for me as someone who appreciates history. So there's history there. There is trauma there. There are shenanigans, or what I call escapades. Couldn't put too many escapades in the book, but some of the escapades were as a result of Deborah's trauma and not wanting to be a victim anymore. So she becomes a victimizer, kind of, sort of. So, yeah.
What they say, hurt people hurt people.
Hurt people hurt people.
Yeah, that's right, Don. That's right. That's right. That's what
so there's that. There's what we stood for. That's Diasporic Africa Press, Brother Kwasi Konadu, who was recently, he was made an appearance in that film on the East, The Sun Rises in the East. The Some of Us Are Brave books, volume 1 or 2. These are interviews I've conducted over the years with a variety of Black women. That is Daraja, Daraja, Daraja Press. And that's a 2-volume set. So Black women and Black men, but Black women, tell your stories. Stay silent no more. Tell your stories. Get your information out there, because it all adds to the tapestry of our history. It all adds to it, and we all need to know the stories.
Now, COVID, like you said, has created a way now that we communicate like this, like we talk on the phone, and in terms of mental health, that now they really have there's a real big group of mental health providers that come. It's called Best Care or whatever, but they are able where you can call them up and decide if you want to do family counseling, and it's really really interesting, and it's a group of Black mental health doctors as well. So it's really interesting that people can get the help, and you don't have to go far than your kitchen table to get that help.
Deborah talks about the fact that we see mental health and therapy. It had been a stigma for so long, but it is coming out of the stigma now. So many people talk about their therapy, their therapists. Deborah was saying how in 1970, she didn't think that was available to her, nor did she think she probably would have been in the right mindset to accept it if it had been offered to her. So we've come a long way. A lot of areas and got a long way to go in others.
Yeah. One of the things that just to build a little bit on what you just said, Donna, right, is that one of the things that's healthy about I do work in community-based violence intervention, right? Is that once upon a time, social work and social workers were used to tear our families apart, and of course, that's
Claudine.
That's what that's no. I'm talking about some some real stuff, right? That's one of the things that happened with Malcolm's family when he was a child,
right?
But now there is a and this language they like to use to not attract too much retrograde attention. But now there's this reimagining of the field that sees a turnaround in how that work should happen, and Black women trying to heal themselves and heal their community. It's a space where there's a real radical shift in that professional culture. And it's a big deal in terms of what we do. We're trying to keeping our brothers from killing each other, or having done some killing already and trying to come out from the darkness of that to put themselves back together, so we can break some cycles of trauma, harm, and violence, and how all of that plays out. Looking at this generation that's behind us, that these heads that are a bit younger than us, out of the voices of radical Black women, right? Who stands out for you amongst our daughters trying to make some change and trying to make some noise?
You're asking me about the present generation?
Yes.
Who stands out? Well, nameless and faceless. I'm sure they have names. I'm at the age where if I'm not interacting with you every day, I don't forget your name. I'm just letting you know that right now.
Yeah.
But we ain't getting younger.
But one of the things that and this is not Deborah speaking, this is me speaking. I'm so happy to have seen so many young people who did not become too demoralized over what happened with Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. Some folks stepped off before that implosion. It's like, we gonna keep doing this work, just don't call us Black Lives Matter Philadelphia or New Jersey, whatever anymore. So this iteration of activism, of a movement, people are involved and engaged and are remaining committed and are doing the work in however way they can, either as individuals or as new organizations. You've got the Movement for Black Lives, which looks like it has maybe parted ways is not the right terminology, but something is going on. There's a separation of, we ain't doing that, we over here. Mm-hmm. So I think that the leadership that has emerged from this latest iteration is definitely hopeful, makes me hopeful, is valuable. I hope to encourage it and to keep it going. But there are a lot of different names out there. I don't want to mention names because I might slight somebody else out, or I might say the wrong name, But when you
and I was looking at some of the names that are in your books, so that's what triggered the question. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate you being,
I'm trying.
inclusively guarded.
But one of the questions I want to ask.
You go right ahead.
Go ahead.
One of the questions I wanted to ask is that, what do you think? What do you think this sister, Deborah Jones, telling her story at this point? What do you think that really means to organizing, right, in our community? Because we all who have been around for a while have heard these stories, from some of the older sisters in terms of how they were treated and mistreated in the movement by some of the elders who we come to respect, who names we call like giants. Mm-hmm. And so when these sisters tell these stories today, it paints a different kind of picture to us, right? Because now we have to take a look at that, and and then remember, we have that Me Too generation that's around, right? Mm-hmm. And so the question is just how do we look at that? And then remember, in light of everything that's going on with with popular culture, you look at Puffy and the court case that he got where his sister said, allegedly some of the things that were done to her. What do you think that does to our movement and young people, and how we structure organizations and all of that? And because I'm aware of some brothers who were involved in some organizations who have experienced some things and have vowed never to tell those things, never to write those books, even though some of these people have been offered millions of dollars to tell those stories.
Okay, so concisely, what is your question?
What do you think her telling her story at this point does in terms of young brothers and sisters being able to organize on an even plane today, right? Because
What her story does, her story is out there for people to partake of it. The onus is on us, and not so much as the reading public, but for those of us who consider ourselves to be activists and or organizers, the onus is on us to create space in our organizations where the behavior that we can model, the behavior, the walk that, there's, you walking your talk, walking the walk as opposed to just talking the talk. We have to be about the business of liberation. You can't have an organization that says it's about liberation and is engaging in oppressive behavior in the household. That's where this stems from, attempting to bring it into the organization and then model it for the world to pick up. We cannot have that. So what it should do, or what I hope it will do, is provide that blueprint of what not to do as organizations. And we have to remember, again, this is the Me Too generation. It was the white girls who said the personal is political. We can learn from looking at other movements, whether they be reactionary or whether they be revolutionary. The personal being political. Is this a movement for liberation, or is this a movement to assuage somebody's ego?
Yes.
Wow.
Is this about assuaging some egos? And I'm going to just put it out there, about making Black men feel good? Or are we just trying to get damn free? Which one is it? If we're trying to get damn free, because unbeknownst to a lot of people, or maybe it is known to a lot of people, I don't know, we don't want to talk about how patriarchy shows up in the Black community. Patriarchy is a system of power and domination. And so because it's always juxtaposed as men versus women, you have Black men saying, well, we don't have no power. We ain't got no corporate power. There are ways that Black men wield power in the Black community. But here's the other thing, the thing that Bell Hooks talked about, but nobody wants to listen because they hate feminists and they hate, Black women in terms of misogyny. Patriarchy is damaging the men also. Patriarchy is about dominating other men also. So when you were talking about Puffy and these allegations by these women, men are coming forward now. This is about power and domination. Stronger men over what are seen as quote unquote weaker men. This is about domination. That's all it's about. And so the easiest target, the low hanging fruit, is women and children. But men get dominated also. Men are also abused. Men are dying because of this patriarchal model that that our community attempts to emulate in many ways. And so that is the discussion we need to have. That's the talk that we need to have. That's the kind of critique that we need to begin to not only have, but institute within our spaces, the spaces that we do control. Because again, we got to ask the question, what are we doing? Are we trying to get free, or are we trying to assuage an ego?
That's right. That's right. Tell no lies. Claim no victory. And by the way, that famous moment when Malcolm asserts that bold, impassioned defense of Black women takes place in Los Angeles. Right.
Yes. Yes.
May 5th, 1964, in the aftermath of LA police killing Ronald Stokes and attacking Mosque number 27. Police brutality.
Yes.
That's a whole other conversation.
LA story. Actually, we have an oral history interview with Ronald Stokes' widow at the Tom and Ethel Bradley Center, the Black Power Archives. She talks about that day. She said she was at the mosque, and Ronald said he was going outside for a minute, and all hell broke loose. She never saw him again. Had a 3-month-old baby.
Akila Sherrill, who's a lead figure in current community-based violence intervention work from Los Angeles.
Right, Brother Akila.
Right. His mother was in Mosque 27. And I've been bugging her, and she was there back then. She's still
Ah,
living, right? She's still very present. And I've
yes.
been bugging the guy. I said, when you gonna let me interview Mom? She got stories to tell where she was during that period.
Do you have Akila's number?
I gotta find it. I can get it.
Okay, well, you text
That
him and I
needs to
text
happen.
him. We
Yeah,
both
that needs to
call him. So
happen.
where's the story at, brother?
Yeah,
Where
she's still serving the community because she's a culinary unless she can cook her West Africa off, right? And she cooks for the streets in her 80s. She's an amazing queen, right? I was like, we got to make that happen, boy. You know, right? I saw him a few weeks ago in Vonda's, and it's a soul food restaurant locally, Thandi, right? I said, we got to make that happen. What's up? You know, so yeah, I'm feeling that. And you out there, you could get to it before I can for sure.
So, Tom, before you leave, you know that question we're gonna ask. What music is inspiring you as you do these projects? You know, when you sat down to do this project with Mother Deborah, what music hip hop artists, individual or group?
Actually, I didn't rely on any music for
Okay.
this project.
Okay.
And this is not a shameless plug,
Mm-hmm.
but my first book,
Mm-hmm.
no doubt, The Murders of Oscar Grant.
That's right.
That was a traumatic experience for me,
Mm-hmm.
just as a writer, as a journalist. I attended the trial every day and received the transcripts of the trial. So, in writing that book, the first chapter, I wrote it in such a way that if you had never seen the video of Oscar Grant being murdered January 1st, 2009, on the Fruitvale BART platform in Oakland, after reading what I wrote, you've just seen the video of Oscar Grant being murdered. And it was hard for me to write it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I wrote that book, which I wrote about 10 years ago, I was relying on 70s R&B. I was relying on 70s R&B. I was relying on South African house music.
That's
House music is
yeah, it's fun.
and
It's
that
fun.
got me through.
all that
It's funny. It's funny you say that. I just
Yeah.
happened to go through something, and I was just listening to Sly and the Family Stone for the last 2 days. So yeah, it's interesting you say that.
Yes, Sly Stone is left coast funk. That's right.
Yeah. Well, it's nice seeing you again, and we have to bring you back, and we have to strictly talk to you about West Coast and what's going on out there, and as we move closer to the next presidential election, we would just like to see what's going on out there on the West Coast.
You know, I'm plugging now. I'm plugging.
Mm-hmm.
Tom and Ethel Bradley Center, Black Power Archives. They've got a YouTube channel. Fonnie Willis, the district attorney in Atlanta, Georgia, her father, John Floyd. We have his oral history. I'm saying we like I'm on staff at Cal State Northern. His oral history is part of the Black Power Archives. Now, John Floyd was a member of the Black Panther Party, a competing formation with the Black Panther Party of Bunchy and John. So he was a Black Panther in Los Angeles, but there came a decision had to be made.
So it splits, yes.
Yeah, a decision had to be made. But he was also a founding member of the Los Angeles chapter of SNCC. A lot of people don't know that SNCC had a LA chapter. If you saw Rustin on Netflix, the film begins talking about Los Angeles and the Democratic National Convention.
That's right. 60.
Dr.
That's right.
Payne came to Los Angeles many times, and there was a West Coast or LA branch of the SCLC as well as SNCC in the latter years of the Civil Rights Movement.
Right. So you're saying that Bonnie Willis's father was one of the original founders?
Fonnie Willis was not the Black Panther Party of Huey Newton and Bobby Seale. It was a different Black Panther. It was a Black Panther political party.
Okay.
Good stuff. Good to have you back.
Thank you, sister. We appreciate you coming through.
We'll get our kilo stuff and send it to you.
I thank you for having me, and anytime y'all want to call me up, I will be there for you.
Okay.
Right on. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Peace.
Awesome. Good stuff. Oh, Lotus show. Women's History Month has come. Now we got the band.
We got our brother, the one and only Congressman Donald Payne. Look like he's on a train.
He's on the train.
Yes.
We're Biden sitting. We're President Biden. He's sitting next to you.
At midnight train in Newark.
Where's President Biden? You on there with President?
Nah, he doesn't need the train anymore. He's got public housing in DC.
Yeah, he go back and forth. Oh man, that train.
And he got public transportation.
No doubt.
Yep.
What do they call the big car that he drive? The president drives in.
The Beast.
The Beast. Yeah. Oh, that Delaware train station is beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
It really is. Yeah. I sent you a text.
Welcome to the Payne Report. We missed you last week, brother. We thought you was gonna be able to be on, with be part of that tribute, man. I know you wanted to be there, for our brother, of course, Pastor in the Hood, Pastor Ali,
I don't know if you heard you. I don't know if you
Might have
heard
really
you.
been better I wasn't there because
he's delayed.
I think I'm a little more control of my emotions. A little more control of my emotions this week as opposed to
last week.
The initial shock of losing a friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Since we go back to 7th grade with each other. I mean, actual schoolmates in Hillside.
Wow.
His name was Bryant Coles. Bryant Coles. That was his government name. And as he got more and more enlightened, he changed and morphed and to the last iteration that we knew of him, the preacher in the hood, Pastor Ali. Because he went through, like most of us did in the 70s, got enamored with the Black Muslim movement. And, being a kid of the 70s, a lot of us were running around here faking the funk. We saw the brothers in the Fruit of Islam running around and, had the ripple sole shoes and dressed neat and wore their shirts and we buttoned them up top. We get the little knit beanies and we put like the star and crescent on the front of the hat. And, we were really just enamored about a movement like that, especially in Hillside, with the strife that we had, in going to school with people that didn't necessarily care for us to be there. So
wait, whoa. There was a strike in here. Tell us about that. Give us a year, time, place.
Sorry.
Who struck? What was the issue?
Hello?
And he's gonna be subject because he's going through. So the internet while he's on the train is gonna go fade in and out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was concerned about that, but we just go back to 13-year-old kids and lose is just we all.
Yeah, 13-year-old kid. Yeah, can you imagine him? So he's known Pastor Brian since 13 years old.
Yeah, he grew up with my stepbrother in Hillside.
Yeah, just see, yeah, and just and it's like and
they're all gone now too.
Yeah, and one would say, like if you had a choice, how would you want to leave? Do you want to go through a 3-year, 4-year long, or do you want to, that's a shock.
And what was it? What was it you were saying? You were saying, Zaid, there was a strike or something at the school?
No, he was alluding to a strike that happened in Hillside.
In Hillside.
I don't know if I don't think he heard it.
Congressman, you said it was a riot or a strike in Hillside?
No, just kind of the strife that we went through
Right.
Strife
being
with E.
African Americans in Hillside at that time. We learned to fight. We learned to fight pretty young because we were end up fighting. We're 13, 14, 15, and we had 25-year-old men coming down on us at the high school to wait for us, and so there were riots. And Brian was a strong, protected brother, and so I'm really not surprised that he ended up going into the ministry because he always looked out for everyone, and
And
that
he
was
was
just in
pastor
his
in the
nature.
hood. So he was still protective, pastor in the hood.
Pastor in the
He
hood,
went he just went right to the
and
he just went right to the block.
we had an interesting relationship. Um, it was kind of love disagreement type thing. He would get on my behind like when I was on the city council, and when he saw things that he didn't think I was doing right, he would be dead up in my behind, and and I would have to try to get him to understand my position and what happened. So you know, he's just going to be missed. The work that he's done in the community um, is legendary, and I'm going to miss my brother. That's all. I'm going to miss
And
him.
you said y'all were on the
Were you
same
able
block?
to look at that? No, we didn't live on the same block,
Oh,
but we were in seventh and eighth grade together in high school.
oh, because I was
So
gonna
we
ask, did
had a
he
lot of
know
same
what?
classes.
Okay, I'm sorry. You were saying, did
I
we
think
get
he
to
took
look?
my lunch
Well,
money. I think he took my lunch money a couple of times.
now you say he was protective. Then he said he was. Then he took your lunch money.
Cautious protector, huh?
Yeah, yeah. I guess
Well,
that protection cost me.
I was gonna ask you. I was gonna say he knew Juanita Thompson too. Okay, so he didn't know Juanita and all her
Oh,
sisters.
absolutely,
Okay. Mm.
absolutely. Everybody knew the Thompsons where they lived.
Yeah, you said them some
You
pretty
know.
girls.
Yeah,
Now,
man. I had a crush. I had a crush on Juanita Thompson my whole life,
I love them.
and
Juanita was one
and
of her
dated
coworkers.
and dated her sister Raquel.
Thompson girls.
Yeah,
You gonna have
but
to write
they
a
but
memoir.
Edwin Thompson was, you know what Donna, Edwin Thompson, Juanita's brother, was like my best friend because we lived about a house away from each other. So
Mm-hmm.
I was
Yeah,
right there
wow.
with the Thompsons.
Yeah, I have to check on my baby girl. You were about to ask us a question. Did we get an opportunity to do what?
I forwarded some video to Ed. I don't know if he used it or where he
Yeah,
utilized it,
you
but I
did.
have I, yeah, I had the honor of and he's the only man of faith that I was able to do this for.
On
But I
Metropolitan.
had him I had him do the opening prayer for the House of Representatives in 1920 1919 maybe. I mean
Mm-hmm.
2019. And he gave the opening prayer before Congress started, and it's quite an honor. And
Big deal. That's a big damn deal.
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And
Let me go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry, son. Go ahead.
yeah, no, and that's why I did it because I wanted a brother from our home to
Mm-hmm.
have that opportunity to do what most people don't think we should be allowed to do. And so it was deliberate
Mm-hmm.
that Pastor Ali
Now
because
let me.
with it,
Now that has a
go ahead.
context. I want to lift this up, and I forgot about that. Right. One
Mm-hmm.
of the things that's important about this historical moment that we're in now, particularly in Newark, particularly in the context of doing community-based violence intervention work that has allowed us to drop violent crime in our town by more than half to historic lows, right? is that the best of our leadership has been in the White House with this, right? My beloved daughter Keisha Yuri was in the White House just a few weeks ago, receiving a certification for particular training that comes out of the Justice Department. I mentioned Akila Sherrill, who helped start the No Community Street Team, been at the White House with President Biden, talking about this very question and why it's important. But Ali being there first, a brother, this work that we do is driven by what we call the credible messenger concept. By those of us who have been in the street or in the system in some kind of real way that allows us to connect with for our kids who are still out there, making those bad moves, getting themselves killed. People forget that our brother had a fall from grace. Fall from grace and had him in the throes of addiction, right?
Absolutely.
Where he wound up harming himself, harming the relationships in his family and his community. And he had to come back from all of that and reinvent himself in the process of his own healing, becoming clergy, and went right back to the very space from which he came as someone who had been harmed and someone who has caused harm and did it in a stellar way, right? For Newark, New Jersey's work around community-based violence intervention work, he is not just one of the founding elders of the mighty Newark Anti-Violence Coalition, he is one of our baddest and pioneering credible messengers. That's the context that we need to, appreciate that you bringing him into that particular space. Somebody from the throes of addiction, cleaning himself up to the point where he can be respected and can present in the halls of Congress. That's Absolutely. Who we are, and that's who we can become. For all the knuckleheads who are listening to this, trying to figure out which way to go.
So,
wake
Congressman,
up, stand up.
And that's what I meant to say.
And what Zaid just said, and if you can just close your eyes and remember the day that he offered that prayer in that room, when he came back, can you visualize? Because it had to be even moving for him and humbling for him to see that. Just in putting in context what Zaid said, and for him to get the offer and to have the opportunity to do that, it had to be a humbling experience for him.
Oh, he was so touched. He wasn't one that showed a lot of, emotional, moments, where you would see that from him. He was always a strong brother. Not that he wasn't compassionate, but you didn't see that emotion from him. He was truly touched because he said, Donald, why me? Why did you?
And he said Donald.
Said, yeah, call him Donald. he said, why me? All the people, all the preachers in Newark, all the big clergy, why me? I said, because I know you as a man.
Mm-hmm.
And I've spent half my life with you. Why not you?
Mm-hmm.
Why not you? Based on what you've been able to accomplish for your community, the respect and reverence you have, why not you? And, if you look at those pictures, you'll see him and me standing on the speaker's balcony, with the Capitol behind us, and pictures with his wife, and just really a touching moment. I was able to find all that, and really recapture the moment. And I spoke about him on the floor that day too, so it allowed me to remember, what I said about him at that time. He will be missed.
He will be missed. Will be missed.
So the ongoing service is next Saturday. The wake is 9:30, and the actual service is at 10 o'clock at the Metropolitan Baptist Church, a church much bigger than his own church in the hood, but he has garnered so much respect from so many levels across so many spaces that he definitely needs that big house to be feeded in his leaving us for the
Same place my father.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Wow. I'm glad you lifted that
Yeah.
up. Glad
And
you lifted.
I think that I know I sent something. You spoke about Metropolitan from the floor. You, you, you I know you told us why you're on the floor more, but I didn't. I just went through. I think I shared where you were talking about Metropolitan from the floor.
I don't
Hello.
know if you heard you. I heard you.
Were you speaking about Metropolitan Baptist from the floor?
Um, well, no, you know what? But that's where my father was put to
Hmm.
rest as well. So it is,
The big
you know,
house, you need a big
it's
house for a home
interesting.
going, and Metropolitan is it in North. Sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it'll be a home going that will be all the all the senses will be touched, all the emotions will be in play that day. There'll be
Hmm.
rejoicing and there'll be sadness and
Hmm.
there'll be hope and there'll be times we're wondering who picks up the mantle. And
And
we
that's
just
important to appreciate too. What you just said right there is very important to appreciate. We lose him on the wings of losing our little brother Imam Hassan Shakur, a young brother who was trying to reclaim the vitality of Mosque 25's history, right? And moving
right,
into our community-based violence intervention ecosystem when we wind up losing him. There are very few clergy who really understand that if you want to serve your people, you got to serve them where they're at, right? Uh, and for the longest, it was him and our little sister Louise Scott Roundtree. Imam Shakur was trying to come in, and thankfully we got our little brother Abdul Haq, Muhammad, bringing back the energy of the mighty nation of Islam. But there are too few of us
right.
of those credentials, of that platform, right, of that stature that are in this work the way we need it. We need. There is the
Very
faith
true.
based. He is one of the best models of what we call a faith based credible message. We have too few of them, and those that we do have, I got a whole pool of them that we're trying to train up in this work because they want to and come a little better, and we were just getting ready to do a series of talks with clergy from some other cities to develop safe surrender the way we have it developed here in Newark, as a part of what we call a faith in the trenches strategy, right? To really have our clergy play their lane in a way that they can maximize us trying to move this piece ahead that we need in our streets. Can't make this up. We can't make this up. We do
Absolutely,
need some folks to step up, no
absolutely.
doubt about it.
So
Go ahead, go ahead. I'm sorry.
so true. No, I mean, and you know, to the extent that they are the leaders, the spiritual leaders in our community, they sometimes need to, you know, have to try to listen to other people as opposed to always thinking they should be at the forefront to
That's right.
play their role, to listen, to be able to listen to somebody that has lost their way and is trying to find their way back, and then rather than giving them a sermon at that time, to just be a listening ear and then see what they can do in order to move that person forward. They got to be able to listen sometimes too. And I find that sometimes that's where the disconnect. But see, that's what Ali was good at. He would listen and then he'd interject. He didn't come showing up like I've got all the answers. I know what. All right, I'm here now. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that. he would assess the situation and then interject where he could be helpful in that situation. That's the brother I remember.
Amen.
Are you going to be home next week, Congressman?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I believe I am.
Okay. Well, yeah, man, because
I have to be there for that. I have to be there for that one.
And
Yeah,
and now that I think about it, Congressman, are the dates almost the same or near? Like the funeral, it was in March that your dad was there, right?
Absolutely. March 7th. Yep.
March 7th, yeah.
right. 2 days after.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. So, Congressman, let's see if we can switch this a little bit, man. Change the tone. You know, I know you saw the two speeches, right? You know, one from Trump and one from President, Biden. At the wall, and this guy claiming he gonna build the wall again. I mean, you know, we were having a conversation with Annette Austin.
Lock him up behind a wall. Let me stop.
Yeah. And she was talking about the level of intimidation that's going on with people just trying to organize to vote in Georgia from the mega people. I'm like, come on, man.
Can you imagine we're back to go? We're back to the start. We're looking for our voting rights again.
Yes.
This is a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, y'all had your 40 years, y'all had your 50 years of civil rights. Now let's go back to when America was great.
And this is Women's History Month. They attack the right of women to choose first, coming after our history, and they're coming after the ballot. And of course, they know what they're doing.
There's no mistake. You're right, Zay. There's no mistake.
I think about the conversation when on one of the Payne shows when Congressman Payne and John Austin had a very, very passionate conversation about young people need to understand about how hard people fought for these rights. Well, they may get to understand real soon when they don't have those rights that they anymore.
All over again.
Absolutely.
On every level of particular,
That's right.
capacity that we need, that they're gonna come after us, we need to be ready to respond unapologetically.
Absolutely.
Unapologetically.
And just think, instead of moving on, because there is a lot of work to be done that we're going to have to redo and keep doing things that need to be currently done. That's a lot.
But the thing is, though, Donna and Zaid and Congressman, I think that I still, just listening to what Annette was saying, I think we're being a little too lax. I think that we've got to turn this thing up, man. Right? Because I think it's clear that it's going to be between Trump and it's going to be between Biden. Right? I think that's clear. But what I think is that and I keep hearing Zaid in my ear, fascism. And the reality of that is what we heard today with Annette saying they've even got organizations down there that are afraid to organize in Georgia because they're afraid of the backlash from the MAGA people. Right? And this is absolutely, because Annette said when she first went down, her parents was doing voter registration in front of supermarkets and all that. But she says but now they're afraid to do that.
Right.
Like, I mean, and so we're talking about 2024, right? Where some guy can have the total support of the Supreme Court around this insane behavior. And where's the power of Congress at this point, right, to do something about it? I mean, it's absolutely incredible because we've got people who are fighting against the progressive brothers and sisters in Congress trying to stand up to do something, and at every turn they're dialing shit back, man.
Yeah, I got a follow-up question for you after that too. After you respond to that.
Can't hear. Is there any additional?
Yeah, I couldn't hear you.
Go re-ask your question there. Go ahead.
So what I'm asking, Congressman, is that the fight that's going on in Congress with the progressive brothers and sisters in Congress, with all of those MAGA folks in Congress who are just looking the other way, right? At every turn, even with following the instructions of Donald Trump, where he says, "Well, don't pass any bills that are going to look like they're supporting Trump," right? And these fools are actually doing this based around that border bill.
His connection is going in and out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
oh, there it is.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
can you hear me?
Yes.
You can't hear us.
Yeah, this whole MAGA movement is a 35% solid voting bloc. 35%. I believe that Donald Trump hasn't gotten any more popular in the last 4 years than he was at his height. And so a lot of independents are pulling away from him. A lot of people that really are embedded in the Bible and believe in their faith, a lot of them are pulling away from him. So I just can't see a scenario unless we sleep on it. Well, let me say that first. First, we have to make sure we do what we need to do. We need to make sure we do what we need to do. And that's go to the polls and vote for Joe Biden. Okay? Then, I'm saying that the former president has not gotten any more popular in this country because of the 91 counts, because of the rape conviction, because of the case that he just lost. And one of the states, was it Colorado, came back and is not going to allow him on the ballot. Was it Colorado?
Colorado, several states. Colorado, Maine, and Vermont.
One of them finally
Colorado
passed.
pushed it the hardest. Yes.
One of them finally passed. So can run or not.
Oh, he's going
because you have to be on ballot in all 50 states.
Right.
So he might be done already.
You went out. You were talking about Colorado when you went out.
Yes, sir. So I just don't want us to sleep in. I think we're in a good position. I think that Joe Biden wins the second. I mean, that's the first thing to start with. He beat him once already. So you're starting in a good place. So we just got to make sure we do what we need to do. I know a lot of people aren't the happiest with Joe Biden, but history, in reality, if you really look at his body of work, and he's lacking in some areas that most of them lack in. And we need to definitely hold his feet to the fire for that. But I'm telling you, history is going to be kind to this president because of the things he saved this country, folks. After COVID, with the rescue plan, he saved this country. And it happened so smoothly, people don't even realize it.
Right.
People don't even realize it.
And you know what else they don't realize? People are getting letters at home that your college debt has been forgiven. You no longer have that. And it was, and the way they did it, you almost thought it might have been a piece of junk mail, but I want to, it's a lot of people. I know I received my letter and I still had $9,000 to pay, and I was $9,000 was forgiven. But I was listening to Karen Honey the other day, and she had a lawyer on who had like $200,000 forgiven. So, and I don't know that um if y'all have the, the Dems, if y'all have got out and talked about that, had some marketing about that, but a lot of people are getting this, and when we're hearing them in different shows and everything, but I don't know necessarily know if I heard you guys talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
hear you.
in the White House and the president, he's acting like he knows something we don't know, because there's no panic in him. There's no, sense of urgency, as we all feel. He's just kind of like going through his day, doing his thing, getting an ice cream cone somewhere, picking up a cup of coffee, like he's got.
Oh, he freezing up again.
Yeah.
They must know something we don't know, because he's just moving in a very nonchalant way, and I hope that's not going to come back to bite us. I hope that's not going to be a detriment, that he's acting so calmly, when the rest of us are looking at this thing and thinking, oh my God, is Trump going to be back? So, I haven't had a conversation with the president in quite some time, although I think I need to probably see if I can get a minute or two. That's all you get about it, a minute or two as well.
But Congressman Payne, as long as you known him, one about his character, the stories I've heard, that has always been his character. You approachable, even and I know my brother told me about this gentleman. He would kind of meet in the park in the where they park their cars, and he would mentor him for like 3 to 5 minutes, and every day, and the person that he talked to, he would talk to the people on the train. He's just always been, and he's a man who's been traumatized too. When he first was elected, his family got killed, and
Right.
so he's been through some things that a lot of people haven't, and his response has he's that's the part of his character I have consistently held, that he's approachable, he's level, and so
Yeah, I was a fan of his for years. I mean, really over the last 20 years, there were probably about 3 or 4 times where I started out supporting Joe Biden before Clinton and Obama and all of that. So he's always been somebody that I've been, a fan of. And so that he's finally here. I wish, it was a 20-year ago version of him, because you really see something. But, you know, I think we got a candidate that has some challenges, definitely, but all men have challenges. And, we have to, I mean, that's the hand we're dealt with now. So we got to make the best of it. That's what I say. Let's not shy away from it. Let's push forward.
What I will say, what I will say, if you have seen presidents, looking at Clinton, Obama, when they went in, how they looked, they were young men going in, when they got elected, and by the time they finished both of their terms, they had white hair, they worked, and it was completely opposite with President Trump. But I can tell you what, these last couple of trials is wearing him down. These pictures you see him coming through these halls, coming through these different hearings and everything. And I know that sister in New York got him on the go. and the sisters in Atlanta. So yeah,
Oh
he
yeah,
is all that worry. He didn't worry them 4 years. He look worried now.
yeah. It's wearing on him definitely, and you know, um, hopefully there are a few more convictions, and then this guy will go away for good. Pardon the pun. Go away and
Yeah,
put him away.
Yeah.
yeah,
But I think we can't take it for granted though, right? I think
right.
that
No.
we can't take for granted that any of that stuff is going to hit before the election. That's why we need to get motivated, get our people organized, right? And get people, primed and ready to go to the polls and vote. Right. We've got to begin to turn that up. We've got to have that conversation no matter what these folks are saying, no matter what it looks like, right? Because I think that, because Zaid to tell you, we asked the mayor the same thing when he was on last month. And the mayor said the same thing. He said, don't forget that half of this country voted for this man.
That's right.
That's
Right.
right.
That's
Mhm.
right.
And that we ought not take that for granted, just thinking that, don't worry, he got all these cases, something's going to catch him. We don't need to go out to vote. No, the hell with
That's
that.
the mistake that was made in 16.
Right.
Mhm.
The hell with
Right.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
No,
No, you're
we
right.
ought to we ought to take the approach, right? That the same thing that folks were saying, oh, he can't win. Even some of the pundits, people on television were saying that shit. We ought
Yeah.
not, the black community, Congressman, we can't afford to buy into that,
That's
Yeah.
right.
right?
We
And we
can't get
can't afford to buy,
lulled.
yeah,
Right.
and
We
we can't
can't get
afford to
lulled
buy,
into complacency.
no,
No.
we
That's right.
can't. And we can't afford to buy into that bullshit sneaker shit he talking about, right?
That's
Right.
right.
You know,
Right.
none of that gimmick stuff that they want to play. Because remember,
Mhm.
Zaid, even the mayor said, he said to us, Congressman, he said he can't believe that we even got some brothers in the community talking about they're gonna vote for him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
And
Yeah.
and we and you and I talked earlier, Ed, and about a young person, young man, last week said he didn't vote, and he knows that Trump is appealing to people that others aren't. But one of the things that we have to remember that Obama's um one of the things that Obama was good at, he's seen things, and he started very small, and he went to coffee clutches, talked to people, sent young people back to their parents and said, ask them why they voting Republican, why are they voting. So we have, like, for instance, when a young man said he didn't vote, and that we have to be ready to sit down and talk to our young people and say, you have to vote, because it may not be an option soon.
Yeah.
You're almost home.
Metro Park.
You know it's time to start. When you when you hear Metro Park, it's time to start packing your bags. So,
Yeah. Time to start getting ready.
and Congressman, you did speak about Metropolitan. You were speaking about their new Family Empowerment Center for the community and job training on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. That
Mm-hmm.
it's seems like it's something really good that they got going on down there. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's going to be a model for churches to be a part of the community and part of the solution um, towards healthcare in the future. So, kudos to Metropolitan Church for, really putting a program together that is going to be
He's been championing
so
that.
helpful as an anchor institution in that area.
Well,
That's like
Pastor
that's
Cass has been pushing that for a minute too.
Yeah, we
Yep.
guess like that, getting back to the base. At one time, the black church was the first stop. You would stop before you made any decision. Pastor, who we voting for? Pastor, what we, that was a
That's right.
serious place.
That's right. And we
Mhm.
got to get that connection back. It
Yes.
appears that, the clergy has forgotten where the only safe place was for us to talk about these things. It was in the church, and now they see you coming. They say, "Oh, here they come, just for some votes." But our history was linked to the church. It was the only
Mhm.
safe place for us to talk about
Right.
those things. So we need to get that. We need to get that back. where it belongs, or else, you know, we are
Robin, Metro Park is in New Jersey now, Robin. Metro Park is in New Jersey now, Robin. Please make your way to the intersection and be mindful for the government.
And while you're on the train, are you still on the transit committee?
I am. Trying to wait to get back to the chairmanship of the rail committee.
And how I know you are you getting how long before Path is pulling into Newark Airport?
That's a good question. We got to continue to work with the Port Authority.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I thought they should create a new train, a light rail, as opposed to those heavy Path railway cars that is like 80-year-old technology.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of stuff out here that is lighter, better, greener,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to just add. They just want to add these old heavy cars, subway cars from 80 years ago onto an extension for us. I don't think that's the way to go. So I've been fighting it. You know, if they're going to do an extension, they need to make it a light rail.
And then if that whole corridor is going to look different, the housing and maybe and I'm sure because I haven't driven down that way, and they're probably even preparing for the housing, preparing for the trains to come. So
Absolutely, you should see. I don't know if y'all been down there on Frelinghuysen Avenue, but to see Seth Boyden gone is amazing, and it's really incredible how much land, you know, those housing projects sat on.
mm-hmm.
It is incredible.
Big area.
You can see from Frelinghuysen Avenue, you can see all the way to Dayton Street School, and you know, it really is amazing what they were able to you know, put together in the 50s to kind of put us all in one area, you know.
Mm-hmm. And the house in now, I think they talked Pennington Court. That's the next one. They said the state's going to come take. Yeah, so the plans are works in motion. So
yeah, they're moving. Well, you know what? I'm probably going to have to sign off so I can get myself together. Yep. I apologize for the train,
but you end up in New York.
I know, right? I've done it before. So.
Hey, Congressman, we got listen, man. You know, we're gonna have to turn that volume up, man. You know what I mean? And especially, you know, in our community, right?
It's true.
So we're gonna have to do that, man. So you know, in the coming months, we're gonna talk about it. You know what I mean? All right.
All right.
Hey, man, we love you, man. You know,
not as much as I love y'all.
All right,
but y'all take care,
home,
and I will see you.
Next
Unfortunately,
week.
See you next week.
And bring your March Madness sheet with you. Let's see how accurate it is.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, guys.
Yeah. All right.
Well, look like we kind of timely tonight.
Yeah.
Because we on Amtrak time, huh?
So, you know, listen, man. Zaid, I'm gonna tell you something, man. These fools are actually going to get. I mean, because you know, the real talk is about the level of corruption with Clarence Thomas, right?
Oh man,
with him refusing to recuse himself based around his wife and everything that she had done to participate, right? In January 6th, man, right?
And the gift taking he's been doing.
Yeah, it get crazy, and forget about being a Supreme Court justice, just being a lawyer. Oh my gosh,
we'd have been disbarred. You know how quick you can get disbarred.
Our black asses would be in jail.
Yes, but I'm saying, as any speculation of that, right? You immediately are brought up in the ethics hearing, right? And before you know it, Zaid, you know what? You can't practice law. You suspended until after the investigation.
Yeah.
Right? This guy is on the goddamn Supreme Court. And his wife is not, and they're, I mean, you know, they're not even denying that those conversations happen. Right? There's evidence to prove that there was text messages going back and forth.
That's right.
And No one's talking about him even recusing himself from this at all.
Yeah, and it's
He need to be removed from the bench.
He
That's what.
should be, but
he hasn't been censured
you
or anything.
nothing, nothing, right? And I can remember this guy. Don't y'all remember when he was going through the hearing process? And remember when he said this was a high tech lynching. He pulled the black card, didn't he?
Sure
Yep.
did. He
And
sure
and
did.
and
Half our
and
community.
and listen, and even Anita coming forth to do that. Do you know what that took
Well,
for
it was
her to
definitely
put
that
her?
was Anita Hill. That's right. Come on.
Yeah, for her to even put herself out there like that, she had a heart for she knew something. It wasn't just some rush. She like this man does not need to be in that seat.
He doesn't deserve to be on the bench. Right,
She mm,
right. And this was before the Me Too thing was
right.
ever a thing,
Hmm.
right? And she
Hmm.
came out and said, who this guy was, right? I mean, just absolutely incredible. And what's interesting is Zaid is that we're talking about someone who has never been a friend to our community, never,
No.
Never, never. Mhm.
right? And
The
at
woman
this,
remind us that when they bum rushed the show at Yale University to get black folks in the Yale Law School, guess who came in behind them? Tom Ass Clarence.
yes, that's right.
Mhm.
And this is a guy who would vote to remove that because right now that's what happened at Yale,
That's
that
right.
now they're no longer using race as one of the parameters to allow you
Oh,
into the school, right? Before they had to count that. They had to say, well,
mm,
okay, making sure that we have enough black and brown representation here. That is no longer
No,
one of the
right.
tools that they use now.
yeah. And one would say that even though they struck it down, we know that we need to use it as a tool because if we
Yes.
don't use it as a tool, that we are going to miss some great minds. They
Listen, man.
know.
Listen, that's the same thing. I'm reading this book right now, right? By this sister, this
Mhm.
doctor, right? We're gonna get her
Mhm.
on the show.
Mhm.
Her name
What's
is
her name, Ed? We just saw the title. What's her name?
Eunice Blackstone
Okay.
Okay.
out of
Okay.
Brooklyn,
Okay.
right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
she's talking about the black position reckons with racism and medicine, right?
Mm,
And when we were talking about having a doctor, doing a segment on this, right? I was thinking about who could we bring on, and then I was thinking about Ali and all of that, and I found this sister's book and I'm reading it. She's talking about all the racism that is involved in medicine, right? How you even looked upon when you go to the doctor,
Yeah.
and how you need an advocate, and how some of the things that had occurred. The reason we don't have, and we've heard the mayor say this too. She said that the sister even said the reason we don't have black doctors, that she said that was systematically done,
That's right.
right?
absolutely.
She said that was not by accident. She said they systematically have done that and continue to do that.
Mm. And at one point, I know I did a career day at Oakwood Avenue School, and one of the at one I know all the black doctors that went through university, and one of them is a cardiac surgeon at East Orange General, which has been renamed. And at the career day, he said, "I look around now, and I don't see anybody that's looking like me coming through these classes." And he's talking to Oakwood Avenue would be K through 7, and he said, "Who in here wants to be a doctor? I need y'all. You start thinking about that now." And and that had to be at least 10 years ago. And he said that, but yeah, I can remember, and I'll tell you, I'll say real quick because I know we talked about it, but you have to look at that blue building in East Orange and on which was built by black doctors when Dr. McCann when he was the chief of East Orange General, but they had on the first floor the pharmacy, all black doctors in
Yeah,
between, and the fifth
I
floor
looked
was
at
probably one of the first healthcare plans, and it was called Crossroads.
that.
And so that was a time our money went in our community, and
Yeah.
everybody could be seen. The whole family was so holistic. And if you had to go into the hospital, you went right there to East Orange General or Orange. It was very thought out, and
Yeah.
how that they did it, but
Yeah.
there was nobody to continue it, and
Yeah.
the question is why.
But Donna, but this sister said, when we get the sister on, what she
Hmm.
said was, she said that what happened then and what's happening now is systematic, right?
Hmm.
And that one of the ways you become a doctor, she said, is that you have a mentor, right? She says doctors, if you don't have a black doctor to mentor you, right? She said your chances of becoming a doctor are slim to none, right?
Wait. Let me say this. Now, hold up. Real important. We have a gateway for folks who want to be doctors coming in our community. And guess where that gateway is? The International School of Medicine in Havana, Cuba.
Yeah, yeah. I
Right?
remember. I
And,
remember
and,
prior
and the precondition is that when you graduate from medical school, you go free. Well, most can go free, right? Or at a very reduced cost. You have an obligation to return to your community for
And give
several
you
years first.
right,
You got
however
folks
many years. Yeah,
right.
most countries where healthcare education is free, that's what they do. You
Yeah,
give it's that's the model. You give it back, and that's not hard because you're giving it back. You're getting paid and you're getting experience.
yeah,
So, yeah. But
yeah.
it's the
Well,
top of
listen,
the
y'all, we
hour.
out of time. Yep, we out of time. So, any last words? Anything y'all want to say? Put on the record before we leave.
Let me lift this up, and this is some more heavy-hearted stuff because we also losing the generation that came before us, in a very real way. I will miss y'all next Saturday because I have to participate in another funeral.
Oh,
Yalu Ferguson, y'all wouldn't know, but she was the wife of Baba Herman Ferguson, right? An old Malcolmite that was wound up going to exile, helped build up Guyana's education and military, came back here to clear his name, wound up doing time. Judge Bruce Wright, uh, got him released after several years. He launched our organization, the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee. That organization is now 31 years in, and he's one of the founders of the provisional government of the Republic of New Africa. Baba Herman Ferguson's wife, Yalu, who is also a founding
Mm.
member of the provisional government of the Republic of New Africa. She just passed away on Thursday. She was 91. And I have to do something at her funeral instead than just coming down on the same day. So I got to actually be in North Carolina. I'll miss the book signing and I'll miss the service. I'm going to write something for my brother, though. I'm going to definitely write
okay.
something, brother,
Put it.
that I'll blog and I'll put out through our network because he was that important to us.
Yeah.
So I will miss y'all next week. Let me say one last thing. Sunday is the anniversary of Najee Seabrooks being killed by the police in Patterson. That same Sunday will mark the 6-month march of Andrew Washington being killed by the police in Jersey City. His family is going to do a memorial tree planting ceremony at 260. I think it's 260 Leonard Street at 4:30 in Jersey City to honor him. So want folks to
When is
look.
that?
Huh?
When is that?
Sunday. It was
Yes,
supposed to be tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be a serious rainstorm for what we're told. So they postponed it to Sunday. So look forward to that. Yeah, I said this wrong street. 260 Randolph Avenue in Jersey City.
Yeah.
At 4:30. Right. Right. Justice for Andrew Washington. So I want to lift that up as we go up out of here.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
You got anything, Donna?
No, good. Everybody have a safe weekend, and please, these rainstorms, I will say that to the community, don't take them lightly. We had one of our ministers several years ago was just driving home in a rainstorm, which you thought to just be a rainstorm, and how when the tree, it was too wet, and a tree fell on the car as she was driving. So these storms are serious, and if you don't have to be out in them, don't be out in them.
All right. Well, listen, y'all. We just want to make sure we thank all of our guests first. Obviously, we want to thank Annette for coming on, and giving us an update on, of course, the schedule with the book, but really just sharing some of the information of what's happening down there in Georgia.
Yeah.
So appreciate
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and Zaid,
Professor Carter. Thank Professor Carter as well.
But yeah, before we do that, I want to just say I appreciate Zaid bringing up them deacons of defense back in the day.
That's right. That's right.
So them brothers, if they
all the guns we got on the goddamn streets now, we need to clean them up, load them up, and train up, right? And be prepared to defend our community. It'll be the ballot or the bullet.
Right.
It'll be liberty, it'll be death, it'll be freedom for everybody or freedom for nobody.
Right.
That's how we need to be riding.
When you said that, Zaid, I said, yeah, where them brothers at? Right? Y'all down there running scared. We had them brothers back in the day. So, but yeah, of course, and then you go down and we want to thank Miss Carter, right?
Yes, Professor Carter, yes.
Professor Carter for coming on. We appreciate her contribution tonight. And then we want to thank Zaid, the sister who came on. I mean, I think that's a hell of a book, brother.
Yeah,
I think her contribution is going to be serious, man.
Oh yeah, definitely ruffle some feathers.
Yeah, brother, it's I mean, I've heard those stories.
You've been telling us about that, right?
Yes, that's what I'm trying to tell you, right? I've heard those stories offline. I've been, Zaid, I've been around this thing, man. With like almost 40 some odd years, so I've heard them sisters, brother. You know what I mean? I have never seen it in a book. I have never read it in a book. But I can only imagine, brother. You know what I mean? So I'm looking forward to reading the book, Yeah.
Well, it's thankful that we were able to separate what was bad about it and keep what was positive, meaning that we continued with Kwanzaa and it didn't die for the sake of that.
Yep. Well, we definitely want to thank that sister for coming on. We appreciate her contribution. Wish her the absolute best. And then, of course, we want to thank the congressman. Even though, he was on the train on his way home, he, found time to do the Payne report. We appreciate that. And, appreciate everyone that came through. I know it was tough for him talking about his friend, Ali, as it was tough for us last week, So, and that's going to be tough on all of us to do Saturday. I know you're not going to be here, Zaid, but we're going to do our best to hold it up for you. And it's going to be tough on all of us. And then I'm not sure what happened with John. He said he was going to be late, so I'm not sure if something occurred. And but we held it up for him tonight. So I thank you and Zaid for coming through, for all of us being able to make it to hold up the show. And we thank everyone for tuning in tonight. As you say, Zaid, we'll catch everybody next week. We'll catch them where, Zaid?
Right in the whirlwind.
Catch y'all in the world.
Don't stop.